Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're seeking calm, deep rest, and peaceful sleep, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
You've been lied to about healing. They told you time fixes everything, that distractions will make the pain fade, that if you just keep moving forward, the scars will disappear. But if that were true, why do old wounds still whisper at night? Why do memories still sting when no one else can see? Why do you still carry a weight in your chest, heavy and invisible, as if peace was always one step out of reach? The truth is, healing doesn't come from forgetting. It doesn't come from forcing yourself to move on. Real healing begins when you stop running, when you turn inward and discover the timeless wisdom the Buddha left behind. Teachings that don't just cover the pain, but dissolve it at its roots. Teachings that bring silence to the storm in your mind and clarity to the confusion in your heart. For centuries, monks and seekers have walked this path. They found freedom not by escaping suffering, but by transforming it into compassion, wisdom, and peace. Tonight, as you listen, you'll step onto that same path. Slowly, the noise in your head will soften, the tightness in your body will loosen, and the wounds you thought would always ache will begin to mend. This is not just another bedtime story. This is a doorway to stillness, to clarity, to a calm so deep it feels like coming home. When morning comes, you won't just feel rested, you'll feel lighter, freer, more at peace with yourself and the world. Are you ready? Then close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let us begin. The night grows deeper and the mind begins to quiet. The stories you've carried all day start to rise to the surface. Memories of hurt, words left unsaid, that lingering sense that something inside is unfinished. Healing feels impossible when the heart whispers, "I am alone in this." Yet the truth is far softer, far more liberating. Beneath every fear, beneath every wound, lies a truth the Buddha revealed. Nothing is separate. The pain you hold, the breath in your chest, the stars above your window, all are threads of the same fabric. And when you see this clearly, isolation begins to loosen its grip. Tonight, let us walk gently into that truth. Emptiness is one of the most misunderstood teachings in Buddhism. People hear the word and think it means life is hollow, meaningless, or cold. But the Buddha never meant that. Emptiness is not a denial of life. It is the unveiling of life's deepest connection. It means that nothing exists on its own, nothing stands isolated, everything arises through causes and conditions. Just as a flower cannot bloom without soil, water, and sunlight, your very existence depends on countless unseen hands, the food you ate today, the air you breathe, the language that shapes your thoughts. When you begin to notice this interdependence, the illusion of being cut off dissolves. Much of emotional suffering comes from the sense that we are separate, that no one truly understands, that our pain is ours alone. Loneliness feeds on this belief, whispering that you are trapped inside your own private world. But emptiness shows you otherwise. When you feel abandoned, you are not an isolated island, you are part of a vast ocean of being. Every person who has ever lost, who has ever cried, who has ever longed for peace shares in your experience. Seeing this doesn't make the pain vanish instantly, but it changes its weight. Instead of being a prison, it becomes a bridge. Consider grief. When someone you love is gone, the mind screams that a part of you has been cut away. Emptiness teaches that even in loss, connection remains. The body of your loved one may no longer be here, but the kindness they gave you, the memories you hold, the way their presence shaped you, those are interwoven into the very fabric of your being. They live on in the choices you make, in the lessons you carry forward, in the compassion you extend to others. Grief softens when you see it is not a wall of separation, but a reminder of the ties that can never be broken. When you study emptiness, you also uncover a profound freedom. Because nothing exists on its own, everything is in constant change. The sadness that feels permanent is not fixed. It arose from conditions, and with time and awareness, it can fade as new conditions arise. Think of the sky. Clouds may cover it, but the openness is always there behind them. Your mind is the same. The heavy emotions that seem unmovable are passing weather. Emptiness reveals this truth. No state of mind, no wound, no fear is solid. Everything is fluid. Everything can change. But this truth must be experienced, not just thought about. The Buddha often pointed to the breath as the simplest way to see emptiness. Notice how you cannot breathe without the trees, without the air, without the cycle of nature that sustains you. Even the act of inhaling is proof that you are not separate. Each breath ties you to the world around you. You cannot exist independently, and that is not a weakness, it is liberation. Now consider anger. When someone hurts you, anger feels sharp, as if you are split from the world, cast into opposition. But when you see through emptiness, anger begins to dissolve. You notice that the person who hurt you was also shaped by conditions, their upbringing, their pain, their ignorance. Just as your anger arises from the conditions of your wound, their actions arose from causes you may not see. This does not excuse cruelty, but it frees you from the story that you were singled out by fate. You see the wider web of causes, and compassion arises naturally. Jealousy, too, begins to crumble under the light of emptiness. When you feel inferior, as if someone else has taken what should be yours, you are caught in the illusion of separation. You think their success exists apart from you, as if life is a competition of isolated beings. But when you see interdependence, you realize their joy, their achievements, their beauty are not thieves of your worth. They are expressions of conditions, just as you are. Their success can even ripple into your life, inspiring growth, offering lessons, awakening gratitude. The more deeply you see emptiness, the less you cling to rigid identities. How often do we imprison ourselves with the words, "I am broken," "I am unworthy," "I am my pain"? These labels feel solid, but they are not. They are momentary thoughts, built from memories, shaped by circumstances. Emptiness shows that who you are is not fixed. It is fluid, spacious, open. You are not bound to yesterday's wounds. Each moment holds the seed of becoming. Science has even begun to echo what the Buddha saw centuries ago. Neuroscience shows that the brain is plastic, constantly reshaping itself based on new experiences. Every time you meditate, every time you meet pain with kindness, you are rewiring pathways in your mind. Emptiness is not a mystical idea, but a lived reality. The very cells of your body are in constant exchange with the environment, replacing themselves, transforming. You are not the same being you were a year ago, not even the same being you were yesterday. When you let this truth sink in, a certain softness arises. You no longer hold on so tightly to your wounds because you see they are not eternal. You no longer cling desperately to joy because you know it too will change. Instead, you rest in the flow of life. This resting is clarity. This resting is peace. Yet emptiness does not mean detachment from life. It means intimacy with life. When you realize nothing stands alone, you also realize that everything matters. Every small act of kindness, every word spoken, every breath taken ripples outward, touching the whole. Your life is not meaningless, it is infinitely connected. To harm another is to harm yourself. To heal yourself is to heal the world. So how do we practice this teaching? Begin by noticing connections in your daily life. When you drink tea, pause and realize the leaves came from distant soil, grown by hands you may never meet, nourished by rains that fell from clouds, harvested, packaged, carried across oceans so you could hold this warm cup tonight. Suddenly, something ordinary becomes a revelation of interdependence. Suddenly, gratitude blossoms. When emotional pain arises, trace it back. Ask, where did this come from? You will see layers, your memories, your culture, your family, the stories you've told yourself. None of them stand alone, none of them are unchangeable, and in that realization, the pain begins to lose its sharpness. The Buddha compared emptiness to a raft. You use it to cross the river of suffering, but once you've crossed, you don't carry it on your back, you let it go. In the same way, you don't cling to the idea of emptiness itself. You use it to free yourself. You see through separation, and in that seeing, the heart opens. Think of how the body heals a wound. The cut feels like an isolated injury, but the entire system, blood, skin, immune cells, works together to restore balance. In the same way, when you embrace emptiness, you allow the whole of existence to help heal your emotional wounds. You are not doing it alone. You never were. As you lie here, let the breath remind you, you belong. You are part of a vast, interconnected web. The loneliness you feel is not the truth of who you are. It is only a passing cloud. The truth is deeper, more spacious. The truth is that you are never separate. The truth is that you are already whole. And as this realization settles in your heart, you begin to notice something shift. The weight grows lighter, the wound less raw. There is space now where there was only tightness before. A space where compassion can flow in, where peace can grow, where clarity can shine, like the first light of dawn breaking through the dark. This is the healing power of emptiness, not coldness, not nothingness, but the gentle unveiling of the truth, that you are connected to everything, that your pain is not permanent, that your being is not fixed. From this place, healing begins not as a distant promise, but as a living reality in this very breath. When the truth of emptiness settles in the heart, the weight of isolation begins to loosen. Yet the journey of healing does not end there. Knowing that everything is connected is powerful. But what about the emotions that still rise like storms? Anger that burns hot in the chest, grief that floods the heart, jealousy that corrodes joy. These feelings may not vanish simply because we see their impermanent nature. The next step is learning how to meet them, how to turn them into something that nourishes instead of destroys. This is the path of transformation, the alchemy of the mind. At the center of Buddhist wisdom lies the teaching that even the most painful emotions can be used as fuel for awakening. They are not enemies to be fought against or buried beneath layers of distraction. They are raw materials. Just as ancient alchemists sought to turn lead into gold, the Buddha taught that we can turn anger into clarity, grief into compassion, jealousy into wisdom. This practice is not about suppression or denial. It is about harnessing the very energy of suffering and transmuting it into something liberating. Anger, when left unchecked, can feel like fire tearing through the heart. It blinds, consumes, and leaves behind ash. But fire is not only destructive, it also warms, protects, and transforms. When met with mindfulness, anger reveals itself as a deep yearning for justice, for care, for recognition. Beneath every outburst lies a wound, a place where love was denied or harm was inflicted. By looking closely at anger without judgment, we begin to hear the hidden message: something valuable has been threatened. Instead of letting it control us, we can use this awareness to act with strength that is guided by compassion rather than by rage. One way to practice this transformation is through slowing down in the very heat of the moment. When anger rises, the body signals it: tightened jaw, racing heartbeat, heat in the face. By pausing and observing these sensations, you create space between the stimulus and your reaction. In that space, anger is no longer a master, but a messenger. You can ask, what is this anger protecting? Often, it is love. Love for fairness, love for dignity, love for connection. When you identify the love at the root, anger shifts from blind fire to illuminating flame. Grief, too, can overwhelm. It is the heavy tide that pulls you under, the echo of emptiness left by loss. Yet grief is also proof of love. If there were no love, there would be no grief. By recognizing grief as a reflection of connection, the pain becomes a doorway into compassion for all beings who experience loss. Rather than shrinking the heart, grief can expand it. The tears we shed for those we lose become rivers flowing into the great ocean of shared humanity. When grief is approached with mindfulness, it becomes tender instead of crushing. The practice is not to force yourself to move on or to silence the ache, but to sit with it gently, breathing with it, allowing it to speak. You may notice that grief softens into gratitude the sorrow for someone gone entwines with the appreciation for having known them at all. Gratitude does not erase grief, but it transforms its sharp edges into something bearable, something even beautiful. In this way, grief becomes a teacher, guiding you to cherish impermanence and to love more deeply while love is present. Jealousy often hides in the shadows, gnawing at self-worth. It whispers that others' joy diminishes your own, that their success exposes your failures. Left unexamined, jealousy poisons relationships and corrodes inner peace. But jealousy is not inherently evil, it is a distorted mirror of longing. At its core, jealousy reveals desire for qualities you value, for growth you crave, for fulfillment you seek. By examining jealousy with mindfulness, it turns from envy into aspiration. You see not what you lack, but what you yearn to cultivate within yourself. Instead of resenting another's achievements, you can let them inspire you. Their success becomes a reminder of possibility, proof that growth is attainable. When jealousy is transformed in this way, it gives rise to mudita, or sympathetic joy, the ability to delight in the happiness of others. This joy is boundless, for unlike material wealth, joy multiplies when shared. Where jealousy contracts the heart, mudita expands it. The alchemy of emotions rests on one principle: no state of mind is fixed. Just as emptiness reveals that all phenomena arise from conditions, this practice shows that emotions too are fluid energies. Suppression freezes them, indulgence inflames them, but transformation releases their deeper potential. Each difficult feeling holds a seed of wisdom. Anger contains clarity about boundaries and justice. Grief holds the key to compassion and gratitude. Jealousy hides the spark of aspiration and the capacity for joy. This transformation requires patience and courage. It is easier to push emotions away or to let them take over than to sit with them mindfully. But sitting is the crucible of alchemy. By breathing with discomfort, you allow it to show you what lies beneath. The practice is not glamorous, it is often slow, raw, humbling. Yet with each encounter, you build resilience. You learn that emotions do not need to dictate your life. You learn to shape them into guides instead of chains. Stories from Buddhist tradition often highlight this path. One tale tells of a monk who was tormented by anger toward a rival. Instead of suppressing it, he meditated on the energy itself, observing how it surged and burned. Over time, he saw that his anger was fueled by pride and fear of rejection. When he acknowledged these roots, compassion arose for himself and for his rival, who carried his own suffering. The fire of anger cooled into clarity, and the monk became known for his patience. Modern psychology echoes these teachings. Cognitive reappraisal, a method studied in emotional regulation, shows that how we frame an experience changes how we feel it. Anger reframed as protection of love softens. Grief reframed as evidence of connection becomes bittersweet. Jealousy reframed as inspiration opens possibility. The Buddha's alchemy anticipated what science now confirms. The mind has the power to reshape its experience. Meditation practices support this transformation. Metta, or loving-kindness meditation, directs goodwill toward oneself and others, easing anger and jealousy. Tonglen, the Tibetan practice of breathing in suffering and breathing out relief, allows grief to be shared and softened. These practices do not erase emotions but weave them into the broader fabric of compassion. Turning poison into medicine also requires honesty. To acknowledge anger, grief, and jealousy without shame is itself an act of healing. Shame is the silent companion of many emotions, convincing us we should not feel as we do. But the Buddha never condemned emotions, he invited awareness of them. By meeting them without judgment, you reclaim their energy for growth. Daily life offers countless opportunities for this practice. When anger rises in traffic, notice it, breathe, and ask what it protects, perhaps the wish for safety. When grief surfaces at the memory of a loved one, let the tears fall, and then whisper gratitude for their presence in your life. When jealousy stings at a friend's success, pause and let it become fuel for your own aspirations while wishing them joy. Each small moment of transformation builds the habit of mindful alchemy. The more you practice, the less frightening emotions become. You realize they are not enemies waiting to ambush you, but teachers arriving with lessons. The heart becomes spacious, able to hold both pain and beauty. You no longer fear suffering because you know it can be used. This is freedom, not the absence of pain, but the mastery of turning pain into wisdom. As the night deepens and the body rests, let this truth settle. Your emotions are not obstacles to healing. They are the very path. Anger can guide you to boundaries and justice. Grief can open you to compassion and gratitude. Jealousy can lead you to growth and joy in the happiness of others. Nothing within you is wasted. Nothing is beyond transformation. When the poisons of the heart are met with awareness, they cease to poison. They become medicine, potent, healing, liberating. This is the power of mindful alchemy, the art of turning even the darkest storms into light. And in that light, you begin to see not only the possibility of peace, but the certainty that it is already within you, waiting to be uncovered. When anger softens into clarity, when grief opens into compassion, when jealousy becomes aspiration, a new space appears inside. It is quieter, more honest. Yet in that silence, another truth begins to surface. The hardest wounds are not always about others. Often, the deepest suffering comes from the way we treat ourselves. The harsh voice inside, the endless comparisons, the shame for not being enough. We may forgive others long before we forgive ourselves. And here is where the next step of healing begins. Learning to bring loving kindness not only to the world, but to the parts of ourselves we dislike, reject, or fear. The practice of metta, or loving kindness, is often spoken of as radiating goodwill outward. May all beings be happy, may all beings be free. But the Buddha also taught that this kindness must begin at home. To extend warmth to others while despising yourself is like trying to light a lamp with no flame. The heart cannot give what it refuses to hold. Metta toward the self is not arrogance or self-indulgence. It is the simple recognition that you, too, are worthy of compassion, even in your most imperfect forms. Many people recoil from this idea. They say, "But I do not deserve kindness. I have failed too often. I have hurt others. I am weak." The mind clings to a shadow image, a collection of mistakes and flaws, and calls it the self. This shadow feels like a permanent enemy. Yet Buddhist wisdom teaches that even these qualities are not fixed. Just as emptiness reveals the fluid nature of all things, metta reveals that every part of you, even the most despised, is capable of transformation. To begin this practice, you must first be willing to see the parts you usually avoid. The impatience that embarrasses you, the envy that burns quietly, the fear that makes you shrink back. These are the aspects that beg for kindness. To push them away only drives them deeper. To scold them only makes them grow stronger in the dark. But when you turn toward them with gentleness, something begins to shift. The critic softens when it is no longer fighting. The fear lessens when it is held instead of denied. Metta for the self you dislike begins with simple phrases. Traditional practice uses words such as, "May I be safe," "May I be healthy," "May I be at peace." At first, the words may feel false, even painful. The mind resists, saying, "I don't deserve this." That resistance is part of the practice. The phrases are not magic spells, they are seeds. Each time you repeat them, you are planting the possibility of kindness in soil that has been barren for too long. Over time, the heart begins to accept what the mind rejects. It is important to understand that metta is not about denying accountability. To send love to the parts of yourself that have caused harm does not mean excusing them. It means refusing to abandon them. A child who misbehaves does not need exile, they need guidance. In the same way, the shadow parts of your being need attention, direction, and care. When held in loving kindness, even your flaws become teachers, showing you where healing is most needed. This practice is deeply linked to trauma. Many people carry inner voices shaped by past criticism, neglect, or abuse. These voices repeat, "You are worthless, you are unlovable." Metta interrupts that cycle. By offering phrases of goodwill to yourself, you begin to replace the inner abuser with an inner ally. Neuroscience shows that repetition reshapes neural pathways. Each time you practice metta, you are rewiring the brain toward compassion. Slowly, the harsh voice loses its grip, replaced by a steadier, kinder tone. To make this practice effective, you can bring mindfulness to the body. Notice where self-criticism lives physically: a tightening in the chest, a sinking in the stomach, a heaviness in the throat. Place your hand there, breathe deeply, and silently offer kindness. May you be held. May you be free from suffering. Linking words with touch and breath helps anchor the practice beyond thought. The body begins to feel what the mind cannot yet believe. Metta also requires honesty about the parts of yourself you dislike most. It is tempting to direct kindness only toward the wounds that make you appear noble: sadness, insecurity, loneliness. But true healing demands that you also include the aspects you would rather hide: arrogance, selfishness, laziness, resentment. These are the places where metta works most powerfully. To send kindness to your fear is good. To send kindness to your pride is deeper. Because when you can hold even the qualities you despise, you cut through the illusion of being divided into good and bad selves. You begin to see the whole. Some teachers speak of this as embracing the shadow. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung described the shadow as the parts of the psyche we reject, bury, or project onto others. Buddhism and psychology converge here. What you resist within yourself does not disappear. It shapes your life unconsciously. Metta shines light on the shadow. By greeting it with kindness, you prevent it from ruling you in secret. One way to deepen this is through visualization. Sit quietly and bring to mind a version of yourself that you dislike, the self that failed, the self that lashed out, the self that feels shame. See this self as if it was sitting before you. Notice its posture, its face, its eyes. Then offer it the same phrases you would to a dear friend. May you be safe. May you be loved. May you be free from suffering. At first, this may feel strange, even impossible. But with repetition, the resistance softens. The shadow begins to receive the light. There is also a paradox here. When you send metta to the parts you dislike, they often change. Not because you forced them, but because you gave them the space to breathe. Anger that is met with kindness reveals its root in wounded love. Laziness, when held with compassion, often shows itself as exhaustion in need of rest. Even arrogance may soften into confidence when it is no longer rejected. What you feared as unchangeable becomes fluid once it is accepted. The practice also extends into daily life. Notice how often you criticize yourself in small ways, forgetting something, making a mistake, saying the wrong word. Instead of repeating the old pattern of scolding, pause and whisper kindness. It's okay. May I learn from this? May I be patient with myself? Each small moment builds the habit of self-compassion until it becomes second nature. This practice does not lead to selfishness. On the contrary, those who are kind to themselves are more capable of kindness toward others. When you are not at war with your own being, you no longer project that war onto the world. You stop demanding perfection from others, stop resenting their flaws, stop using them as mirrors for your own self-hatred. Metta for the self creates space for metta for all beings. Stories from Buddhist tradition remind us of this. There is a tale of a monk who despised his own body, seeing it as impure and shameful. He practiced metta for years, learning to direct kindness toward his very flesh. Over time, his hatred turned to gratitude. He saw the body not as an enemy, but as a vessel of practice, the very ground of his awakening. His compassion for himself radiated outward, and he became known for his gentleness toward all beings. Modern studies confirm this. Research on self-compassion shows that people who practice it are more resilient, less prone to anxiety and depression, and more capable of healthy relationships. Self-compassion reduces fear of failure and increases motivation, not because you pressure yourself, but because you support yourself. Just as a child learns best when encouraged, the self grows best under kindness. As you lie quietly, you can begin this practice now. Bring to mind something you dislike about yourself. Feel the resistance, the tightness, and then, softly, offer the words, "May I be free from suffering. May I be at peace." The words may not feel true at first. That does not matter. They are seeds. Plant them anyway. Water them with patience. Trust that over time, they will grow. This is the power of metta for the self you dislike. It does not erase your flaws or deny your mistakes. It does something greater. It teaches you to hold your whole being with gentleness, to see even the darkest parts as worthy of care. From this ground, true transformation becomes possible. Healing is not about cutting pieces of yourself away. It is about embracing yourself fully so that every part may find its rightful place. In this way, the practice of metta becomes a bridge between shadow and light. It frees you from the prison of self-hatred and opens the heart to its natural state of compassion. And as this compassion grows, you find yourself living with more patience, more forgiveness, more peace. The war within subsides, and what remains is a steady kindness that touches everything it meets. The night deepens, and the heart softens. The harsh voice fades, replaced by something quieter, more spacious. Loving kindness flows inward, filling the places once abandoned. And in that warmth, you begin to rest not as a perfect being, but as a whole one. When the practice of loving kindness begins to soften the sharp edges of self-criticism, the heart opens to a new layer of truth. Healing the relationship with yourself is profound, yet life will always place you in the presence of others. And it is there, in the push and pull of relationships, that the deepest wounds often reveal themselves. The people around you act as mirrors, reflecting back the patterns you carry, the karmic imprints left unresolved, the parts of yourself still hidden in shadow. What feels like conflict, betrayal, or irritation is often a message pointing directly to the places within that need light. This is the essence of the mirror approach, to use relationships not as battlegrounds, but as teachers. When you encounter someone who stirs anger, the first reaction is often to blame them entirely. Yet if you pause, you may notice that the intensity of your reaction arises not only from their behavior, but from something old inside you. A harsh word from them touches the memory of criticism from long ago. An act of neglect touches the residue of childhood abandonment. Without awareness, you lash out, believing the present moment is the sole cause of your pain. With awareness, you see that the other person has simply illuminated an old wound. The mirror does not create the scar, it shows you where it is. This perspective shifts the way you engage with relationships. Instead of asking, "Why is this person hurting me?" you begin to ask, "What is this situation reflecting back to me?" This is not about excusing harmful behavior. It is about reclaiming power. When you realize that much of your suffering comes from internal wounds awakened by external events, you are no longer trapped as a victim of others' actions. You can respond with clarity instead of blind reaction. The Buddha's teaching on karma helps to deepen this understanding. Karma is not punishment. It is the unfolding of patterns created by past actions, thoughts, and emotions. When someone's behavior stirs something in you, it may be activating karmic memory. The harshness you feel may be connected to unresolved anger, the jealousy to unresolved insecurity, the betrayal to a lingering fear of abandonment. These karmic imprints continue to shape your present until they are seen clearly. Relationships bring them to the surface precisely so they can be healed. One of the most powerful practices here is mindful observation. When you feel triggered by someone, pause and trace the feeling back. Ask yourself, where have I felt this before? The answer may surprise you. Often, the pain in relationships today echoes voices and experiences from childhood, where early impressions left deep marks. By identifying these roots, you begin to see the karmic chain that links the past to the present. And once you see it, you can begin to release it. Another important aspect is projection. What you judge harshly in others often points to qualities you have not accepted in yourself. For example, if laziness in another person infuriates you beyond reason, it may reflect your own fear of being unproductive or your hidden exhaustion. If arrogance enrages you, it may mirror your own suppressed pride or insecurity. The mirror does not lie, it shows what is hidden beneath the surface. By acknowledging this, you turn judgment into self-awareness. But awareness alone is not enough. The next step is choosing how to respond. When someone's actions trigger pain, you have a choice: react from the wound or respond from clarity. Reacting often means lashing out, withdrawing, or clinging. Responding means recognizing the wound, tending to it, and then engaging from a place of compassion. This does not mean tolerating abuse or staying in harmful relationships. It means using every interaction as an opportunity to grow in awareness and to free yourself from automatic patterns. The mirror approach also reveals positive truths. Just as negative traits in others can reflect unhealed wounds, positive traits can reflect your own hidden potential. When you admire someone's patience, kindness, or courage, it may be because those qualities also exist within you, waiting to be developed. Relationships, then, not only reveal wounds, but also awaken dormant strengths. The practice of gratitude is key here. When you see relationships as mirrors, even difficult ones, you begin to feel gratitude for the lessons they bring. A friend who triggers jealousy teaches you where to cultivate contentment. A partner who stirs fear of abandonment teaches you where to strengthen self-trust. A colleague who inspires admiration shows you qualities you can nurture. Gratitude shifts the heart from resentment to openness, making every connection an opportunity for growth. In Buddhist thought, the teaching of dependent origination explains that everything arises in relation. Just as no self exists independently, no relationship exists in isolation. Every interaction is part of a web of conditions shaped by both parties' histories, wounds, and intentions. To see relationships as mirrors is to recognize this web and to use it skillfully. Instead of reacting blindly, you observe, reflect, and act with awareness of the greater whole. Practical exercises can help cultivate this approach. One practice is journaling after conflicts. Write down the situation, your emotional reaction, and then ask, what part of me was touched? What earlier memory does this echo? How can I meet this part of myself with kindness? This process turns conflict into an opportunity for insight rather than bitterness. Another practice is silent contemplation during meditation. Bring to mind someone who triggers you. Notice the emotions that arise, the stories your mind tells. Then, instead of fueling those stories, sit with the raw sensation in the body, the tightness, the heat, the heaviness. Offer metta to that sensation. May this part of me be free from suffering. By doing so, you heal not through the other person changing, but through changing your relationship with your own wound. This path requires humility. It is easier to blame others than to face your own reflections. But the Buddha emphasized that liberation comes through self-knowledge. Every relationship is an invitation to deepen that knowledge. Even the most painful connections hold value if you use them to illuminate your blind spots. Over time, practicing this way transforms the quality of your relationships. You no longer cling to people to validate you or reject them to protect you. You engage with them as companions on the path, each one reflecting parts of yourself back to you. Conflicts become less threatening because you see them as opportunities. Love becomes deeper because it is not based on illusion, but on awareness. This approach also cultivates equanimity. By seeing both wounds and strengths reflected in others, you no longer swing wildly between idealization and hatred. You begin to hold others with balanced compassion, knowing they too are shaped by wounds and karmic patterns. You stop demanding perfection and start embracing reality. This does not mean you tolerate harm, but you meet it with clarity rather than confusion. As the night stretches on, let this truth settle. The world around you is a mirror. Every smile, every argument, every silence reflects something of your inner world. You cannot control the mirror, but you can choose how to look at it. You can use it to fuel resentment, or you can use it to awaken. The practice of seeing relationships as mirrors does not isolate you. It connects you more deeply. For when you recognize your wounds in the faces of others, you also recognize theirs in yours. Compassion arises naturally, not as an effort, but as a realization. And in that compassion, both you and those around you begin to heal. The journey continues, each step revealing more of the heart. The mirror does not flatter, nor does it condemn, it simply shows what is. And by seeing clearly, you walk the path of healing with honesty, courage, and love. When you begin to see relationships as mirrors, the world reveals not only the surface of interactions, but also the hidden roots beneath them. Every conflict, every attraction, every repeated pattern whispers of something older, carried silently through time. These are not random accidents. They are threads of memory woven into the fabric of the present. In Buddhist thought, this is karma, not fate carved in stone, but the momentum of past actions and emotions shaping today's responses. To understand karma in this way is to see that your emotional life is not only about what is happening now, but also about what has been left unresolved before. Karma as emotional memory is not about mystical punishment. It is about cause and effect in the most intimate sense. When a strong emotion arises and is not processed fully, it does not vanish. It settles into the mind and body like a residue. Later, when a similar situation appears, The residue stirs and colors your perception. A small disagreement may feel overwhelming because it awakens the memory of rejection. A slight criticism may feel unbearable because it echoes years of harsh judgment. In this way, the past continues to live in the present, repeating itself until it is brought into awareness. To see karma as emotional memory is to recognize that your present reactions are often disproportionate, not because you are weak or broken, but because they are carrying the weight of history. Each unresolved moment stacks upon the next, forming patterns that appear unshakable. Yet Buddhism teaches that these patterns are not permanent. With mindful attention, the karmic residue can be released, and new responses can be written. The first step is awareness. Most people live at the surface, blaming the present situation for their suffering without recognizing the older wound it awakens. Mindfulness invites you to pause and notice. When you feel anger, flare, or sadness overwhelm, instead of drowning in the story, you observe the sensation. You ask, what is being touched here? Where have I felt this before? The body often knows before the mind does. The tightening in the chest, the sinking in the stomach, the trembling in the throat. These signals point to older layers of experience. Once you begin to notice these layers, you create space between stimulus and reaction. Instead of being dragged by the old pattern, you can meet it with clarity. This is the rewriting of karma, seeing clearly where the pattern comes from, allowing the emotion to be felt without suppression, and choosing a different response. Each time you do this, the grip of the old memory weakens. Buddhist teachings often describe karma as seeds. Every thought, word, and deed plants a seed in the soil of consciousness. Some seeds grow quickly, others lie dormant for years. When conditions ripen, the seed sprouts. Emotional memory functions in the same way. A harsh word from decades ago may sprout suddenly when someone today speaks in a similar tone. The original seed was never uprooted, but awareness allows you to tend the garden differently. Instead of letting weeds overrun the soil, you learn to nourish seeds of compassion, patience, and wisdom. It is important to understand that karma is not fixed destiny. It is potential, shaped moment by moment. While the past influences the present, it does not dictate the future. Every moment of mindful awareness is a moment where new karma can be created. This is why meditation is so powerful. It interrupts the unconscious chain of reaction and replaces it with conscious choice. Consider anger. If anger arises and is expressed through harsh words, it plants seeds of more conflict, reinforcing the karmic pattern. If anger is suppressed, it plants seeds of resentment, also reinforcing the pattern. But if anger is observed, acknowledged, and then transformed into clear communication or compassionate action, it plants seeds of healing. The memory of anger is rewritten into a memory of strength and clarity. Over time, the old pattern dissolves. Grief follows the same principle. If grief is avoided, it hardens into numbness. If it is indulged without awareness, it can drown you. But when grief is held mindfully, when tears are allowed to flow and gratitude is remembered, it plants seeds of compassion for all who suffer loss. Each encounter with grief becomes an opportunity to soften rather than close. The karmic memory of loss is rewritten into the karmic memory of tenderness. Jealousy, too, can be reshaped. If jealousy is left unchecked, it breeds bitterness and rivalry. If denied, it festers in secret. But if jealousy is examined honestly, it reveals what you long for, and it can be transformed into motivation or joy in the happiness of others. This plants seeds of generosity and appreciation. Over time, what once poisoned relationships begins to nurture them. Mindful attention is the tool that allows this rewriting. It is not about forcing positivity or pretending wounds do not exist. It is about turning toward the raw feeling with presence. When you bring awareness to an old emotional memory, you release its grip. The mind no longer runs on autopilot. It begins to see choices where before there was only compulsion. The body holds much of this karmic memory. Trauma research shows that unresolved experiences are stored in physical sensations, tight muscles, shallow breath, restless tension. Buddhist meditation often begins with the body, because to release karmic patterns, you must release them not only in thought, but in sensation. Breathing into tightness, relaxing the body, and bringing kindness to areas of pain allows the emotional residue to dissolve gradually. Forgiveness plays a central role in transforming karma. Not forgiveness as passive tolerance, but forgiveness as release of the chain. When you hold on to resentment, you carry the karmic seed forward, reliving the injury again and again. Forgiveness is not about excusing the harm. It is about refusing to let the harm continue to shape your future. By letting go, you free yourself from repeating the same memory endlessly. Equally important is self-forgiveness. Many karmic patterns are fueled by guilt and shame for past actions. These emotions keep you bound to the past, replaying mistakes without resolution. To forgive yourself does not mean ignoring responsibility. It means acknowledging the harm, making amends if possible, and then planting new seeds through different choices. Self-forgiveness transforms guilt into learning, shame into humility, and regret into wisdom. Compassion naturally arises when you see karma as emotional memory. You realize that others, too, are reacting not only to the present, but to their unresolved past. The harsh person may be carrying years of unhealed wounds. The cold person may be protecting themselves from past betrayals. Recognizing this does not mean tolerating abuse, but it does open the heart to empathy. Instead of meeting hurt with hurt, you can meet it with understanding. This perspective also reduces self-blame. When you react strongly to a situation, it is not because you are weak, but because the old wound is deep. Seeing it as karmic memory allows you to meet yourself with patience. Just as physical scars take time to heal, so too do emotional scars. Each mindful moment is a step in the healing process. Practical exercises help make this real. One practice is to reflect at the end of the day. Where did I react strongly today? What past memory may have been touched? Can I bring kindness to that memory now? By tracing the chain back, you loosen its hold. Another practice is guided meditation, where you visualize the younger self who first experienced the wound. You sit with them, offer them compassion, and assure them they are safe now. This practice rewrites the emotional memory directly, integrating the past into a healed present. Over time, you begin to see life differently. Challenges are no longer random punishments, but opportunities to heal old patterns. Each trigger becomes a teacher. Each difficult emotion becomes an invitation to plant new seeds. Karma is no longer a burden dragging you down, but a path showing you where freedom is possible. This shift brings immense clarity. Instead of repeating the same cycles, you begin to act with wisdom. Instead of carrying resentment, you carry understanding. Instead of being bound by old pain, you are guided by new insight. The wheel of karma, once turning unconsciously, begins to turn in the direction of liberation. As you rest tonight, let this truth take root. You are not doomed to repeat the past. The patterns that bind you are not permanent. With mindful attention, every old wound can be rewritten into wisdom. Karma is not a prison, but a teacher. Emotional memory is not a curse, but a doorway. Step through it, and you will find that each moment holds the power to free you. When the weight of karmic memory begins to loosen, when old emotions are no longer chains but lessons, a new doorway quietly appears. The heart longs not for more analysis, not for more explanations, but for stillness. So much of suffering is fueled by words, words spoken in anger, words left unsaid, words replayed endlessly in the mind. Yet the deepest healing often arises in a space where words are set aside. In Buddhist practice, this is known as noble silence, a silence not of emptiness but of depth, where truth is revealed beyond the reach of intellect. Silence in this sense is not simply the absence of sound, it is the presence of awareness unclouded by constant chatter. Most people live surrounded by noise, but the loudest noise is not external, it is the restless commentary of the mind. Thoughts argue, compare, judge, plan, regret. This mental noise drowns out the subtle wisdom of the heart. Noble silence interrupts this cycle. By resting in stillness, you allow what is hidden beneath the surface to rise without distortion. When you enter silence, you may first encounter discomfort. The mind resists, scrambling for words to fill the emptiness. Memories may rush in, emotions may surface. This is not a failure of practice, it is the practice itself. Silence acts like a mirror, showing you the root of pain without distraction. Instead of covering wounds with speech or thought, you face them directly. In that facing, clarity begins to form. Buddhist teachings often emphasize that insight is not reached by debate, but by direct experience. Words can point to truth, but they cannot contain it. Just as tasting a fruit is different from describing it, resting in silence allows you to experience healing directly. Pain that once felt overwhelming is seen clearly as transient sensation. Confusion that once seemed endless dissolves into spaciousness. What could not be solved by reasoning is softened by stillness. Periods of noble silence are woven into many Buddhist traditions. In monasteries, silence is practiced not only to avoid distraction, but to deepen presence. Without the constant exchange of speech, every action becomes more mindful: the way you walk, eat, breathe. This heightened attention reveals subtleties that are usually missed. You begin to notice how emotions arise and pass without needing words to justify them. The simple act of being becomes enough. Silence also reveals the roots of craving and aversion. When you are not speaking, you see more clearly how often speech is used to avoid discomfort. You may notice the impulse to complain, to gossip, to defend yourself, to seek approval. Without giving voice to these impulses, you watch them rise and fall. In that watching, their power fades. Silence is not repression, it is exposure. It exposes the hidden drivers of suffering so they can dissolve naturally. Modern life rarely allows such silence. Constant communication through devices, endless streams of information, and the pressure to respond quickly leave little room for stillness. Yet this makes noble silence more necessary than ever. Even short periods of silence can reset the nervous system, calm the mind, and reconnect you with deeper clarity. Research shows that silence lowers stress, reduces blood pressure, and increases creativity. What ancient teachers knew intuitively is now confirmed scientifically. Silence heals. The silence also carries a quality of compassion. When words are set aside, judgments soften. You stop rehearsing arguments, defending positions, or clinging to identities. You sit simply as you are, no longer performing. In that simplicity, self-acceptance grows. You realize you are not your roles, not your stories, not even your thoughts. You are the awareness beneath them, steady and vast. This recognition itself dissolves pain. To practice noble silence does not require retreat to a monastery. You can begin with moments in daily life. Choose one meal to eat without talking, focusing fully on taste, texture, breath. Set aside time each day to sit in quiet, observing the flow of thoughts without speaking them aloud. Spend part of a walk in silence, listening deeply to the sounds around you without commentary. These small practices build the habit of stillness, preparing the mind for deeper silence. When pain arises in silence, the key is to stay present. The mind may want to escape, but if you breathe and remain, you will see the pain shift. What once seemed solid reveals itself as a series of sensations, thoughts, and memories. By not speaking about it, you stop reinforcing the story. By not naming it, you allow it to dissolve in its own time. Silence strips away the labels, leaving only raw experience, which is less frightening than the stories woven around it. Noble silence is also deeply relational. In silent retreat, people often report feeling more connected to others, not less. Without words, communication shifts to presence, to subtle gestures, to shared awareness. You begin to sense the common humanity beneath the masks of speech. This shared silence nurtures compassion because it reveals that beneath all the words, every being longs for peace. The Buddha himself often remained silent when asked certain questions, especially those that could not lead to liberation. His silence was not avoidance, but teaching. By refusing to engage in endless speculation, he pointed disciples back to direct experience. The most profound truths, impermanence, suffering, interconnection, cannot be fully explained in language. They must be tasted in silence. Silence also prepares the ground for right speech. When you cultivate silence, the words you do speak carry more weight. They arise from clarity rather than compulsion. You speak less, but with more care. This transformation reduces conflict and deepens trust in relationships. In this way, silence is not against communication, it purifies it. The healing power of silence lies in its capacity to reveal what is already present. You do not need to add anything or chase anything. You only need to stop covering it with noise. Beneath the chatter, beneath the stories, lies a natural peace. It is not created, it is uncovered. Noble silence is the path to this uncovering. As you rest now, allow silence to spread through you. Let go of the need to label, to explain, to narrate. Let the body breathe, the mind settle. Notice how the absence of words feels. Notice what arises when you do not reach for explanation. Within this stillness, healing is already unfolding. Pain loses its solidity, clarity shines without effort, and the heart rests in its natural state of peace. In the silence beyond words, you do not need to be anyone or prove anything. You are simply present. And in that presence lies the deepest clarity, the kind that no book, no argument, no speech can give. It is the clarity of direct knowing, the peace of simply being. This is the gift of noble silence, to reveal the root of pain and to uncover the vast, quiet freedom that was always here. When silence is allowed to settle, when words no longer cloud perception, the mind begins to see more directly. In that stillness, another truth becomes unavoidable. Everything passes. The body shifts with every breath. Thoughts dissolve as quickly as they arise. Feelings change without warning. Yet the ego clings, grasping for permanence, trying to hold together a fixed sense of me. This grasping is the root of pride, fear, and attachment. The practice of facing impermanence with awareness, what can be called the mindful death of the ego, offers a way to loosen that grip. By letting small parts of the ego die each day, we learn to live with less fear and more freedom. Ego is not evil in itself. It is a function of survival. It organizes experience into I and mine, allowing the body and mind to navigate the world. But left unchecked, it builds illusions of control and permanence. It convinces you that your status, your possessions, your opinions, your very identity must remain fixed. When life inevitably changes, ego resists and suffering arises. Daily contemplation on impermanence gently erodes this illusion. It does not destroy the self, but reveals its fluid nature. One way to practice this is to reflect regularly on the fragility of the body. The Buddha often instructed disciples to contemplate that the body is subject to aging, sickness, and death, not to depress the mind, but to awaken clarity. When you remember that even this body will one day be gone, pride softens. The obsession with appearance or achievement loosens. Fear of loss diminishes, because loss is already understood as part of life. Each small recognition of impermanence is like a micro-death of the ego, dissolving the false belief in permanence. Daily experiences provide countless opportunities for this practice. When a thought arises and fades, notice it. That was a birth and death. When an emotion surges and then calms, observe it. Another birth and death. When you let go of an opinion, when you release a grudge, when you surrender the need to be right, the ego dies a little. These micro-deaths are not tragic, they are liberating. They prepare the mind to meet larger changes with equanimity. Attachment is one of the strongest expressions of ego. The mind clings to people, possessions, and roles as if they guarantee security. Yet everything you cling to will change. Relationships evolve, possessions decay, roles shift. By contemplating impermanence daily, you begin to hold lightly. You can still love, still care, still act responsibly, but without the desperation of clinging. This lightness is not detachment in the sense of coldness. It is freedom from the illusion that anything can be kept forever. Fear is also dissolved through this practice. Much fear is rooted in the denial of change. The ego fears death most of all because it threatens the illusion of a fixed self. But when you allow micro-deaths every day, letting go of pride, of control, of rigid identity, you train the mind to accept the larger truth. Death of the body then becomes part of the natural flow, not an enemy. Those who practice this deeply often face death with peace because they have already died many times in small ways. Pride, too, is softened through mindful death of the ego. Pride insists on being seen, being recognized, being superior. But when you reflect on impermanence, you see that all accomplishments, all recognition, all status are fleeting. Kings and beggars alike turn to dust. The ego that once shouted, "Look at me," begins to whisper, "All things pass." In this humility, compassion grows. Instead of seeking to dominate, you seek to serve. Instead of clinging to superiority, you embrace equality. Meditation practices can support this contemplation. One traditional practice is maranasati, or mindfulness of death. Practitioners reflect daily on the certainty of death and the uncertainty of its timing. This reflection is not meant to create anxiety but to sharpen presence. When you know life is fragile, you stop wasting time on trivial resentments or endless distractions. You live more fully, with clarity about what matters. Another method is to notice impermanence in the smallest details. Watch how a candle flame flickers, how sounds arise and vanish, how breath enters and leaves. Each moment reveals transience. By resting attention here, the mind absorbs impermanence not as theory, but as direct perception. Slowly, the ego's illusion of permanence weakens. Modern psychology supports these insights. Studies show that awareness of mortality, when approached mindfully, increases gratitude, reduces materialism, and deepens meaning in life. Far from causing despair, facing death honestly often awakens vitality. This mirrors the Buddha's teaching. By facing impermanence, we free ourselves from the ego's desperate denial and open to authentic living. In daily life, micro-ego deaths appear as choices. You may choose to let someone else have the last word, releasing the ego's need to win. You may choose to forgive instead of holding a grudge, releasing the ego's need for superiority. You may choose to step back from constant self-promotion, releasing the ego's need for validation. Each of these choices is a small surrender, a rehearsal for the ultimate letting go. These practices do not erase individuality, they refine it. Without the distortions of pride, fear, and attachment, the self becomes a clearer channel for compassion and wisdom. You still act, speak, and love, but without the heavy burden of defending an illusion. You live more lightly, aware of the flow of birth and death in every moment. The mindful death of the ego also deepens connection with others. When you release the rigid sense of self, you see more clearly that others are not separate. Their joys and sorrows are intertwined with yours. Compassion arises naturally when the boundaries of ego soften. Fear of vulnerability decreases because you no longer need to protect a fragile self-image. You can meet others openly, honestly, tenderly. Contemplating impermanence daily brings profound clarity. Decisions are guided less by pride and more by wisdom. Relationships are held with more appreciation, knowing they will not last forever. Gratitude deepens because every moment is recognized as precious. Fear of change diminishes because change is no longer resisted but embraced as the natural rhythm of existence. As you rest now, let this truth settle into your heart. Everything is passing. Each breath rises and falls. Each thought appears and dissolves. Each moment is born and dies. The ego clings, but you can release. And in releasing, you do not lose, you gain freedom. Micro-deaths of the ego prepare you for the great death, not with terror but with peace. The mindful death of the ego is not a loss but a return to humility, to compassion, to the spacious awareness beneath all identities. It is the daily practice of letting illusions fade so that truth may shine. And in this truth, there is no fear, no pride, no desperate attachment, only the steady peace of one who knows that to die each moment is to live fully. When the grip of ego begins to loosen through daily reflections on impermanence, space opens for a wider perspective. The self no longer feels like a fortress that must always be defended, and the heart becomes more sensitive to the currents of suffering that extend beyond one lifetime. For many, the pain they carry is not only personal, it is woven from the struggles of parents, grandparents, and generations before. Trauma, fear, and silence often flow down family lines like rivers that never found release. Healing at this level requires a practice that is both intimate and vast, one that meets not only your own wounds but the echoes of those who came before. In Tibetan Buddhism, the practice of Tonglen offers such a path, breathing in suffering, breathing out relief, transforming inherited pain into compassion. Generational wounds are not always spoken aloud, yet they shape lives quietly. A parent who never learned how to express love may pass on distance. A grandparent who endured war or poverty may pass on fear of loss. Families often carry unhealed grief, shame, or anger, handing them down through behaviors, beliefs, and even silence. Modern science now affirms this, showing that trauma can leave marks not only in memory, but also in the nervous system and gene expression, patterns that ripple into future generations. What Buddhism intuited long ago is now being confirmed. Suffering is not isolated to one person. It is shared across time. Tonglen directly addresses this shared burden. The practice reverses the instinct of self-protection. Normally, when faced with suffering, the mind recoils, wanting to avoid it. Tonglen teaches the opposite, to breathe it in with courage, to touch it fully, and then to breathe out comfort, peace, and healing. This counterintuitive act transforms the relationship with pain. Instead of being poisoned by it, you become a channel for its transformation. Applying Tonglen to generational wounds deepens its power. As you breathe in, you take in not only your personal pain, but also the suffering carried by your family line. You acknowledge the silence, the hardships, the unspoken grief. With each out-breath, you send them relief, warmth, forgiveness, release. In this way, you do what perhaps no one in your lineage could do. You turn toward the wound with compassion instead of passing it forward. This practice does not mean you absorb harm into yourself. The breath is symbolic, it transforms. Breathing in suffering is not taking it into your identity. It is bringing it into the light of awareness where it can change. The out-breath is the active response, sending love where once there was only pain. In this exchange, the heart expands and inherited burdens begin to lift. A practical approach begins with awareness of what you have inherited. Sit quietly and reflect. What patterns run through your family? Is there recurring fear, anger, shame, or silence? Where do you notice echoes of these patterns in yourself? Identifying them is the first step. Once they are seen, they can be held with compassion. Begin Tonglen by breathing in the weight of that pattern, feeling its presence without resistance. Then breathe out release, sending healing backward and forward through the family line. This work is often emotional. Tears may come as you acknowledge what has long been denied. Grief may arise for ancestors who suffered in silence. Allow these feelings to flow. They are part of the healing. The practice is not about fixing history, but about transforming your relationship with it. By meeting inherited suffering directly, you free yourself and offer freedom to those who will come after you. One powerful aspect of Tonglen is that it expands empathy. When you breathe in the suffering of your family, you realize how much of their behavior was shaped by pain they could not resolve. A parent's harshness may be seen as the echo of their own wounds. A grandparent's silence may be understood as protection from trauma too heavy to speak. This recognition does not excuse harm, but it transforms judgment into understanding. In that understanding, forgiveness can grow naturally, not forced but arising from compassion. Science supports this kind of healing. Studies of intergenerational trauma show that cycles of pain can be interrupted when someone consciously processes emotions instead of repeating them. Tonglen offers a direct method for this. By holding suffering in awareness and transforming it through compassion, you interrupt the chain. The burden no longer passes unconsciously. It is met, transformed, and released. Another dimension of Tonglen for generational wounds is honoring resilience. Families pass down pain, but they also pass down strength. Survival, endurance, love, in small gestures, all of these flow alongside trauma. In Tonglen practice, you can breathe in not only suffering but also the memory of resilience, and breathe out gratitude. This balances the heart, preventing it from becoming overwhelmed by grief alone. The practice also affects how you relate to future generations. Whether you have children or not, your healing influences the world beyond you. Each time you meet inherited suffering with compassion, you change the energy that would otherwise be passed on. The cycle is interrupted, and what flows forward is lighter, freer. This is one of the most profound acts of service. Healing not only for yourself, but for those who will live after you. The process can be guided by ritual. Some practitioners light a candle for ancestors, acknowledging their presence before beginning Tonglen. Others place family photos nearby, bringing the lineage into awareness. These gestures help ground the practice, making it concrete. As you breathe in suffering and breathe out relief, you visualize it spreading across generations, touching those who came before and those yet to come. Silence supports Tonglen deeply. Without words, the practice becomes visceral. The breath carries suffering and relief beyond concepts, reaching places that language cannot touch. Many find that Tonglen practiced in silence has a profound effect on the nervous system, calming tension and opening the heart. There are challenges in this work. Facing generational wounds can awaken resistance or fear. The mind may whisper that the pain is too heavy, that it is not yours to carry. In such moments, remember that Tonglen is not about taking ownership of the wound. It is about transforming the relationship with it. The breath symbolizes your capacity to connect with suffering without being destroyed by it. Each breath out is a reminder that relief is always possible. The practice also requires patience. Generational wounds are deep, and healing them is not instant. But even small steps matter. Each time you breathe consciously into the pain of your lineage, you lighten the weight a little. Over time, these small acts accumulate, creating a profound shift. Tonglen for generational wounds cultivates humility. It reminds you that you are part of a vast continuum, shaped by those who came before and shaping those who will come after. This perspective softens ego further, reducing the illusion of separateness. You see yourself as a link in a chain, with the power to change the direction of that chain. As the night deepens, let your breath carry this awareness. Breathing in, acknowledge the suffering carried silently by your family. Breathing out, send them peace, forgiveness, and release. Feel the burden lighten, not just for you, but for the whole lineage. With each breath, the chain of suffering is weakened, and the chain of compassion is strengthened. Tonglen shows that even inherited wounds can be transformed. What was once passed down as pain can be transmuted into wisdom and love. This is not only personal healing, it is ancestral healing, collective healing. And in this practice, you become both the recipient of compassion and its source. The breath makes no distinction. It simply flows, connecting past, present, and future in one act of release. To practice Tonglen for generational wounds is to step into a role of healer for your lineage. You do not erase the past, but you change its weight. You do not carry the wound forward, but you send compassion instead. In doing so, you honor the struggles of those who came before, and you gift those who come after with a lighter inheritance. This is the gift of Tonglen, to turn even the heaviest suffering into compassion, to breathe relief into the silence of generations, and to transform inherited pain into a source of strength for the path ahead. When the practice of Tonglen begins to soften ancestral burdens, a profound recognition arises. The pain you carried was never only yours, yet within your own life there are patterns that repeat like unbroken circles. Certain emotions return again and again, almost as if reborn in different forms. Anger may fade only to reappear with new faces. Fear may dissolve for a time before resurfacing. Longing may take new shapes, but never seem to end. These loops are not accidents, they are samsara, lived in the inner world. Just as beings are said to wander through cycles of birth and death, emotions too cycle endlessly until awareness interrupts the chain. Samsara in emotions means that suffering is not only about what happens once, but about the way the mind repeats its own dramas. You may notice that every time you are criticized, the same storm rises. Every time love is withheld, the same ache returns. It is as if each event is not new, but a continuation of an old story. Without seeing this, you live as though trapped in a wheel, reacting the same way over and over, expecting different outcomes, but receiving the same pain. Recognizing this cycle is the first step toward freedom. The Buddha described samsara as fueled by craving, aversion, and ignorance. In emotional life, craving appears as clinging to pleasure or validation, aversion as pushing away discomfort or pain, and ignorance as the failure to see impermanence clearly. These three forces drive the wheel of emotional rebirth. Each time craving, aversion, or ignorance dominates, the cycle turns again. Anger is born, fades, and is born again. Fear arises, subsides, and arises again. Desire flares, quiets, and flares again. To liberate from these cycles, you must first become aware of their recurrence. This requires mindfulness not only of isolated emotions, but of patterns over time. When anger comes, notice how familiar it feels. Trace it back to past moments when the same anger appeared. Recognize that it is not new, it is part of a cycle. By naming the cycle, you begin to step outside of it. Awareness creates distance. The anger is no longer an absolute truth, but a recurring wave. The body often reveals these cycles before the mind does. Perhaps grief always arrives with heaviness in the chest, or fear always tightens the stomach. These somatic signatures are like footprints of samsara in the body. By paying attention to them, you can recognize the cycle earlier, before it fully takes over. In that early recognition lies the chance to respond differently. One method to break these cycles is to apply the practice of noting. When a familiar emotion arises, instead of being swept away, you mentally note it: anger, fear, longing. This simple act shifts the mind from identification to observation. You are no longer anger itself. You are the awareness noticing anger. This disrupts the cycle by removing its fuel. Another method is to reflect on impermanence in the midst of the emotion. When sadness grips, remember that it has come before and passed, and it will pass again. This recognition loosens the belief that the current emotion is eternal. The cycle depends on the illusion of permanence. Seeing through that illusion weakens its hold. Compassion is also essential. When you recognize recurring emotions, it is easy to judge yourself. Why am I here again? Haven't I grown past this? But judgment only strengthens the cycle, adding another layer of suffering. Instead, meet the recurrence with compassion. This is a deep pattern. It takes time. May I be patient. May I be free. Compassion softens the cycle, making space for transformation. Buddhist teachings describe the wheel of samsara with 6 realms, each representing different states of suffering. The realms of gods, demigods, humans, animals, hungry ghosts, and hell beings. These realms can be seen as metaphors for emotional states. Pride reflects the god realm, envy the demigod realm, desire the hungry ghost realm, anger the hell realm, ignorance the animal realm, and mixed human emotions the human realm. Throughout a single day, you may pass through many of these realms internally. Recognizing them shows how samsara is not only cosmic but also psychological. Liberation begins by refusing to spin the wheel unconsciously. Each time you meet a recurring emotion with mindfulness, compassion, and clarity, you weaken the cycle. Over time, what once felt inevitable begins to dissolve. Anger that once ruled you becomes a brief visitor. Fear that once paralyzed you becomes a passing sensation. Longing that once consumed you becomes an opportunity to reflect on deeper needs. Meditation is the most direct training for this. Sitting quietly, you watch emotions rise and fall without feeding them. At first, the mind will chase after each one, but gradually it learns to rest. The cycles reveal themselves clearly. Irritation becomes boredom, boredom becomes restlessness, restlessness becomes distraction, and then the cycle repeats. By observing without reacting, you begin to see the mechanics of samsara. You see how the wheel turns, and in seeing, you are no longer trapped. Breaking emotional cycles also requires changing conditions. The Buddha taught that everything arises from conditions, and emotions are no different. If you repeatedly place yourself in environments that trigger the same wounds, the cycles will continue. Part of liberation is consciously shifting conditions, choosing healthier relationships, cultivating supportive habits, engaging in practices that nourish rather than deplete. Changing conditions weakens the fuel of recurring emotions. Reflection on karma is helpful here. Each time you react in the same old way, you reinforce the cycle, planting seeds for it to return. Each time you respond differently, even in a small way, you plant seeds for freedom. Over time, these small choices accumulate, and the old patterns lose power. The cycle of rebirth in emotions begins to slow. Silence, as explored before, also supports this process. In silence, cycles become clearer. Without the distraction of constant speech or activity, the recurring patterns rise to the surface. Though uncomfortable, this clarity is a gift. It allows you to see what must be released. Generational aspects also play a role. Many emotional cycles are not only personal but inherited. Recognizing this helps reduce shame. You are not flawed for repeating these patterns. You are carrying echoes of those before you. Through awareness and compassion, you can interrupt the cycle, offering healing not only for yourself, but for your lineage. Ultimately, liberation from samsara in emotions does not mean never feeling anger, fear, or longing again. It means not being bound by them. Emotions will arise, but they no longer dictate your life. You can feel anger without hatred, fear without paralysis, longing without despair. You experience them fully and let them pass, like clouds moving across the sky. As you rest now, reflect on the cycles in your own heart. Notice which emotions return again and again. Recognize that they are not new, that they are part of a wheel. With awareness, compassion, and practice, you can step off that wheel. The cycles of emotional rebirth need not continue endlessly. Liberation is possible, not in some distant life, but here, in this very moment, with this very breath. This is the teaching of samsara in emotions, that the loops of suffering are not eternal prisons, but patterns that can be seen, softened, and released. To recognize the cycle is to weaken it. To meet it with compassion is to transform it. To live with awareness is to step into freedom. And in that freedom, you no longer wander endlessly. You rest in clarity, peace, and the quiet joy of being free. When the cycles of emotional samsara become clearer, the heart begins to soften. You see anger not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Fear not as a punishment, but as a messenger. Longing not as a curse, but as a call to deeper awareness. In that softening, compassion naturally grows. Yet here lies another challenge: how to express compassion without losing yourself. Many confuse kindness with self-erasure, generosity with neglect of one's own needs, compassion with people-pleasing. But Buddhist compassion is not about abandoning your own truth. It is about loving fully while standing firmly. It is warmth with wisdom, kindness with boundaries, a balance that prevents compassion from turning into harm. True compassion arises from clarity, not compulsion. People-pleasing often comes from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being worthy. The actions may look similar on the surface, but the roots are different. In people-pleasing, you give because you are afraid not to. In compassion, you give because your heart is open, and you know it is appropriate. One drains you, the other nourishes both you and the other. Recognizing this difference is crucial for liberation. Boundaries are not barriers against love. They are the structures that allow love to remain healthy. Without them, compassion becomes enabling. You may end up supporting harmful behaviors, tolerating abuse, or sacrificing your well-being in the name of kindness. The Buddha's teaching of the middle way applies here. Too rigid, and you become cold. Too porous, and you become overwhelmed. The balance lies in discernment, offering kindness where it can nurture growth while saying no when it feeds harm. To practice compassion without enabling, you must first know your own motivations. Before acting, pause and ask, is this coming from love or from fear? Am I giving because I truly wish to relieve suffering, or because I am afraid of disapproval? This self-inquiry is a form of mindfulness. It ensures that your actions arise from clarity, not compulsion. Another key is understanding the difference between alleviating suffering and protecting someone from the consequences of their actions. Compassion does not mean shielding others from reality. Sometimes, allowing someone to face the results of their choices is the most compassionate act, because it gives them the chance to grow. Enabling, by contrast, keeps them stuck. For example, giving endless money to someone trapped in addiction may feel kind, but it prevents them from confronting their pain. Compassion would instead mean offering support for recovery, even if it means saying no to requests that perpetuate harm. This discernment requires courage. Many fear that setting boundaries makes them selfish or unkind. But selfishness arises from attachment to self-interest, while boundaries arise from wisdom about what supports growth. Saying no to harm is not rejection, it is love expressed in a deeper form. The Buddha himself set boundaries, refusing to engage in fruitless arguments or to indulge harmful behavior. His compassion was steady, but it was not indulgent. To cultivate this balance, it helps to practice metta, not only for others, but for yourself. When you direct loving kindness inward, you recognize your own worthiness of care. This prevents compassion from turning into self-neglect. From this foundation, you can offer love outwardly without draining yourself. Self-compassion is the root that sustains compassion for others. Without it, your giving will eventually collapse into resentment. Another practice is to develop equanimity, the quality of balance in the face of joy and sorrow, gain and loss, praise and blame. Equanimity allows you to offer compassion without being swept away by the emotions of others. You can be present with their suffering without drowning in it, supportive without carrying what is not yours. This prevents compassion fatigue and ensures that your kindness remains steady over time. Compassion without enabling also requires honesty. Often, people-pleasing involves telling others what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. True compassion speaks truth gently but firmly. It does not manipulate to avoid discomfort. It trusts that honesty, even when difficult, is ultimately more healing than false comfort. This is why right speech in Buddhism emphasizes both kindness and truth. Words must be both, not one at the expense of the other. In relationships, this practice transforms dynamics. Instead of constantly bending to keep peace, you begin to engage from a place of authenticity. You give when it is nourishing, and you decline when it is harmful. Others may resist at first, especially if they are accustomed to your people-pleasing. But over time, authentic compassion builds deeper trust. People know that when you give, it is real, not coerced. Compassion without enabling also extends to how you treat your own inner patterns. Sometimes the one you enable most is yourself, indulging harmful habits because you mistake them for comfort. Here too, compassion means setting boundaries. Meeting your craving with kindness does not mean feeding it endlessly. It means understanding its root and guiding yourself toward healthier expression. In this way, boundaries are not only external but internal. The practice can be deepened through meditation on compassion itself. Visualize someone you care about who is suffering. Wish them peace, but also reflect what action would truly support their well-being. Then visualize yourself and ask the same. In this dual reflection, you train the mind to see that compassion must be balanced, that love must be both tender and wise. Stories from Buddhist tradition often illustrate this principle. One tale tells of a monk who encountered a thief. Instead of fighting or indulging him, the monk offered him food but refused to allow further theft. The act was compassionate, addressing the thief's hunger, but it also set a boundary against harm. This is compassion without enabling, meeting suffering without feeding its destructive form. Modern psychology echoes this. Research on boundaries shows that those who maintain them are more capable of genuine empathy. People who overextend themselves in attempts to please often burn out, leading to resentment. But those who balance kindness with self-care sustain compassion longer and more deeply. Buddhism anticipated this truth. Compassion must be guided by wisdom to remain whole. In daily life, opportunities to practice arise constantly. A friend asks for help beyond your capacity. A family member repeats destructive patterns. A colleague seeks validation through constant demands. In each case, you can pause, breathe, and ask, what action here is truly compassionate? Sometimes it will be saying yes, other times it will be saying no. Both can be expressions of love, if rooted in clarity. The ultimate aim is not to withdraw from others, but to engage more truthfully. Compassion without enabling fosters healthier relationships, greater resilience, and deeper authenticity. It prevents the exhaustion of endless giving without replenishment and creates space where love can flourish without distortion. As you rest now, let this understanding settle. Compassion is not weakness, and boundaries are not cruelty. When guided by wisdom, compassion flows freely without drowning you or others. It heals without harming, nurtures without indulging, and sustains without exhaustion. This is the strength of Buddhist compassion, steady, balanced, and deeply liberating. When compassion grows strong enough to hold firm boundaries, it becomes clear that suffering cannot be healed only at the surface. Setting limits protects your heart. But the question remains, why do certain wounds feel so persistent? Why do some emotions return with such intensity, no matter how much kindness you bring to them? To answer this, the Buddha pointed to a teaching at the very core of his wisdom-dependent origination. It reveals that every experience, including pain, arises through a chain of causes and conditions. By tracing an emotional wound back through this chain, you can uncover its subtle roots in craving and ignorance, and only then can the cycle be released. Dependent origination teaches that nothing exists in isolation. Every feeling, thought, and reaction arises because of prior conditions. An emotional wound does not appear suddenly, fully formed. It is the result of a series of links: contact, sensation, perception, craving, clinging, becoming. By examining these links carefully, you can understand not just what you feel, but how it was constructed moment by moment. This awareness dismantles the illusion that your pain is an unchangeable fact. It shows that suffering is a process, and what is built through conditions can also be unbuilt through wisdom. Take the example of rejection. At first, there is contact, the moment someone turns away or withholds affection. This contact gives rise to sensation, a sharpness in the chest, a contraction in the stomach. Then comes perception. The mind interprets the sensation as abandonment, recalling past moments of being unwanted. Next arises craving, the desperate wish for acceptance, for proof of worth. From craving comes clinging, the stories the mind repeats endlessly: I am not enough, I will always be alone. That clinging solidifies into becoming, the sense of self identified with rejection, shaping how you relate to others in the future. What felt like a single wound is revealed as a chain of events. Seeing this chain with clarity loosens its grip. Ignorance is the beginning of the chain. Not ignorance as stupidity, but as misunderstanding. At the root of every wound lies ignorance of impermanence, ignorance of interconnection, ignorance of the true nature of self. Believing that the self is fixed, you take every rejection as proof of your permanent unworthiness. Believing that feelings are absolute, you cling to sadness as if it will never pass. Believing that happiness must come from outside, you chase after approval endlessly. These misunderstandings feed craving, and craving drives the cycle of suffering. By practicing mindfulness, you begin to interrupt the chain. When contact occurs, you pause before interpretation. You notice the raw sensation without rushing to label it. When craving arises, you recognize it as desire rather than truth. When clinging begins, you observe the stories spinning and choose not to feed them. Each interruption weakens the cycle. Over time, the wound loses its solidity because the conditions that sustained it are no longer present. This tracing back requires patience. The mind often wants quick answers, but dependent origination asks for careful observation. You may need to sit with a painful memory and ask, what came before this? What was I feeling? What thought arose? What desire followed? Slowly, the chain becomes visible. This process is not about analysis in the ordinary sense, but about experiential insight. The more you practice, the more naturally you see the links in daily life. The practice also reveals compassion for yourself and others. When you see that even harmful actions arise from chains of causes, you understand that people are not monsters by nature. They are caught in cycles of ignorance and craving, just as you are. This understanding does not excuse harm, but places it in context, opening the door to forgiveness and wise response. Healing through dependent origination also highlights the importance of wise attention. What you attend to strengthens. If you focus on the wound alone, it deepens. If you focus on the chain that creates the wound, you begin to dismantle it. Wise attention means not feeding unhelpful stories, not indulging destructive craving, not ignoring impermanence. It means directing awareness where it can untie the knot rather than tighten it. Meditation on dependent origination can be practiced in stages. Begin with awareness of contact, each sound, sight, or thought that arises. Notice how contact leads to sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Then watch how the mind interprets these sensations, creating perception. Stay present as craving arises, the wish for more pleasure, less pain, or escape from neutrality. Notice the clinging that follows, the identification with the desire, the story of self built around it. Finally, observe how all of this solidifies into becoming actions, speech, and self-identity. With each stage seen clearly, the grip weakens. The Buddha compared this process to a fire fueled by wood. If the fuel is removed at any link, the fire goes out. In the same way, if ignorance is replaced with understanding, craving replaced with presence, clinging replaced with letting go, the fire of suffering cannot continue to burn. This understanding also changes how you relate to trauma. Instead of seeing trauma as an unchangeable scar, you see it as the result of repeated cycles of contact, sensation, craving, and clinging. This does not deny the reality of pain, but reframes it as a process. By meeting the process with mindfulness, you can loosen its hold, transforming trauma into wisdom. Modern psychology parallels this teaching. Cognitive behavioral therapy identifies how thoughts, feelings, and behaviors reinforce each other in cycles. Breaking the cycle requires awareness and new responses. The Buddha described this dynamic centuries ago in dependent origination. Both traditions point to the same truth. Suffering is maintained by patterns, and patterns can be changed. Another aspect of this practice is seeing the role of desire in subtle forms. Not only craving for pleasure, but craving for identity, craving for certainty, craving for recognition. These subtle cravings often hide beneath wounds. For example, fear of failure may be rooted in craving for a fixed self-image of success. Anxiety about relationships may be rooted in craving for permanent love. By identifying these subtle desires, you bring them into awareness, where they can no longer control you unconsciously. The practice also shows the liberating power of letting go. Each time you release a craving or a story of self, the chain weakens. Letting go does not mean apathy, it means trusting the natural flow of impermanence. You no longer need to force reality into your expectations. You allow joy and sorrow to come and go, knowing they are part of the same chain. In this letting go, wounds heal not by erasing the past, but by no longer being bound to it. As the night deepens and the body rests, let this teaching sink into your heart. Every wound you carry is not a fixed object, but a chain of causes. Every emotion, every story, every reaction is conditioned. By tracing them back, you see their roots. By meeting them with mindfulness, you cut the chain. What once felt permanent dissolves into flow, Healing through dependent origination is not quick or easy, but it is profound. It transforms suffering from a prison into a path. Each wound becomes an invitation to look deeper, to uncover ignorance, to release craving, and to awaken to the freedom that lies beneath. In this way, the very patterns that once bound you become the keys to liberation. When the chain of dependent origination is traced, and the roots of craving and ignorance are exposed, the mind becomes clearer. Yet clarity alone is not always enough. Emotions, even when understood, often linger in the body. They create heaviness in the chest, tension in the shoulders, restlessness in the breath. Insight may free the mind, but the body still carries the residue. This is why practice must also be lived physically. Among the simplest yet most overlooked methods is walking meditation. The act of placing one foot in front of the other with full awareness has the power to ground emotions, to reset energy, and to bring balance where thought alone cannot reach. Walking meditation is often underestimated because it appears so ordinary. People expect transformation to come from silence on a cushion or profound philosophical reflection. Yet the Buddha himself taught walking as one of the 4 noble postures of meditation, equal to sitting, standing, and lying down. Walking with awareness is not a lesser practice. It is a doorway into presence that connects mind and body, earth and breath, movement and stillness. When emotions feel stuck, walking meditation provides release. The steady rhythm of steps engages the body, giving restless energy a channel. Instead of turning inward endlessly, the mind meets the sensation of each foot touching the ground. The weight transfers, the muscles shift, the breath aligns with the movement. Slowly, the emotional turbulence that once felt unbearable begins to dissolve into rhythm. The body becomes an anchor, reminding you that you are here, in this moment, not trapped in the past or future. Walking meditation is particularly effective for emotions that create agitation, anxiety, frustration, restlessness. Sitting still during such states may intensify them, like pressing on a wound. But walking channels the energy without repression. The body moves, the mind observes, and the storm begins to settle. Each step becomes both an outlet and a return to presence. The practice begins simply. Choose a path, short or long, and walk slowly, with attention on each step. The focus is not on reaching a destination, but on experiencing the movement itself. You can coordinate breath with steps, inhaling for a few, exhaling for a few. This natural synchronization steadies both body and mind. Over time, emotions that felt overwhelming begin to loosen. What was stuck begins to flow. Grounding is another gift of walking meditation. Emotional pain often lifts you out of the body into spirals of thought. You replay conversations, rehearse arguments, ruminate on wounds. Walking interrupts this. The pressure of feet against the earth, the sensation of balance shifting with each step, draws awareness back into the body. This grounding reconnects you with reality beyond thought. The earth beneath your feet becomes a teacher, steady, supportive, unchanging beneath constant movement. There is also a symbolic power in walking meditation. Each step becomes a letting go. With every exhale, you release a little of the weight carried in the heart. With every inhale, you take in stability and clarity. The forward motion mirrors inner progress, moving through suffering instead of being paralyzed by it. Even in the smallest space, walking becomes a pilgrimage of healing. This practice also connects to the teaching of impermanence. As you walk, each step arises and passes. No step can be repeated, no moment recaptured. Walking meditation trains the mind to accept this truth, not as theory but as experience. Emotions, like steps, arise and pass. Nothing is fixed. This embodied realization helps dissolve attachment to pain. Modern research supports these insights. Studies show that mindful walking reduces stress, regulates emotions, and improves overall well-being. The physical act of walking stimulates circulation, balances the nervous system, and promotes calm. Combined with mindfulness, it becomes not just exercise, but medicine for the heart and mind. One of the strengths of walking meditation is its accessibility. You do not need special conditions or long hours. It can be practiced in a hallway, a garden, or even on the way to work. Every step can become an act of awareness. This makes it especially helpful for those whose emotions erupt in daily life, outside formal meditation. A short mindful walk can reset the mind in moments of stress, preventing cycles of reactivity. Walking also cultivates patience. Unlike rushing to a goal, walking meditation slows the pace deliberately. It invites you to rest in each step without hurry. For those caught in the constant drive of modern life, this slowness is radical. It teaches that healing does not require racing forward, but arriving fully in the present. Another benefit lies in the integration of breath and movement. When emotions are intense, the breath often becomes shallow or erratic. Walking meditation restores its rhythm. Inhalation and exhalation align naturally with the steps, creating harmony between inner and outer movement. This balance soothes the nervous system and opens space for clarity to return. The practice also nurtures gratitude. As you walk slowly, you notice details usually missed: the texture of the ground, the play of light, the sensation of air. These small observations awaken appreciation. Gratitude shifts the emotional field, making room for joy even in the midst of pain. In Buddhist tradition, monks often practiced walking meditation between long periods of sitting. They knew that stillness and movement must balance each other. Too much stillness can stagnate, too much movement can scatter. Walking bridges the two. It refreshes the mind while keeping awareness steady. For emotional healing, this balance is essential. Walking meditation can be adapted for specific emotional states. For anger, walk with awareness of each step, softening the ground beneath you, releasing heat with every exhale. For sadness, walk gently, allowing the rhythm to cradle the heart, breathing in comfort and breathing out heaviness. For anxiety, walk slowly, grounding each step firmly, reminding yourself of stability in the present moment. Each adaptation tailors the practice to the wound that needs healing. There is also a communal dimension. Walking meditation practiced with others creates shared silence and presence. The rhythm of many feet moving together generates a collective field of calm. In difficult times, walking in community can magnify healing, showing that you are not alone in your suffering. The shared steps weave connection without words. Walking meditation also supports insight. As the mind settles into rhythm, thoughts quiet, and deeper understanding arises naturally. Problems that seemed tangled may loosen. Emotional knots may reveal their roots. Unlike forced thinking, insight in walking meditation arises organically, like clarity after a storm. In daily life, this practice can prevent emotional buildup. Instead of waiting for emotions to overwhelm you, short, mindful walks throughout the day allow continual resetting. Even a few mindful steps between tasks can shift the energy, clearing residue before it hardens. Walking becomes not only a practice for crisis, but a habit of maintenance, keeping the mind light and clear. As the night deepens, let this truth settle. Healing is not always found in complex methods. Sometimes it is in the simplest act, repeated with awareness. One step, then another. Breath in, breath out. The body moving, the mind observing, the heart releasing. Walking meditation may appear ordinary, but it holds extraordinary power. It grounds, it resets, it frees. To walk mindfully is to return to yourself with each step. It is to remind the heart that suffering is not permanent, that energy can flow again, that peace is as close as the ground beneath your feet. This is the gift of walking meditation, a gentle, steady path back to balance, one step at a time. When the steady rhythm of walking meditation begins to release the heaviness carried in the body, another truth rises quietly from within. Even in the deepest mud, something pure can grow. The body finds calm in steps, but the heart still asks, how can pain itself become strength? How can trauma, grief, or hardship be more than scars? In the Buddhist tradition, the answer is often given through a symbol so simple yet profound that it has endured for centuries: the lotus. The Lotus Sutra speaks of resilience not as escape from mud, but as the ability to bloom unstained within it. This image holds the key to transforming suffering into clarity, a reminder that adversity itself can become the ground of awakening. The lotus does not reject the mud, it rises through it. Without mud, no lotus could exist. Trauma and suffering, in the same way, are not obstacles that disqualify you from peace. They are the very conditions that make clarity possible. Pain cracks open the heart, forcing awareness to deepen, compassion to expand, wisdom to ripen. Just as the lotus turns murky water into nourishment for its bloom, human beings can turn experiences of difficulty into sources of resilience. The transformation is not automatic. It requires conscious practice, but the possibility is always present. Resilience in Buddhism is not mere survival or stubborn endurance. It is the ability to remain clear and compassionate in the midst of suffering. Trauma often distorts perception, filling the mind with fear, shame, or despair. The Lotus Sutra's teaching shows another way: to see suffering as a teacher, to treat adversity as a field for growth. Resilience here is not hardening against pain, but softening into it without being destroyed. It is flexibility, like a reed that bends with the wind rather than breaking. The lotus metaphor reveals a deep truth about healing. You do not need to wait for perfect conditions. Many postpone peace, thinking they must first escape their struggles. But the lotus teaches that clarity can arise right where you are, in the very circumstances you wish to avoid. Mud does not prevent the bloom, it enables it. Trauma can feel like mud weighing you down, but when approached with awareness, it becomes the soil from which strength grows. This transformation begins with acceptance. Just as the lotus root takes nourishment from the mud without resisting it, resilience grows when you stop denying your pain. Denial freezes trauma in place. Facing it with honesty allows the process of change to begin. Acceptance does not mean approving of what happened. It means acknowledging reality fully, without hiding. This acknowledgement creates space for healing. Once pain is accepted, mindfulness allows it to be observed without drowning in it. Trauma often feels overwhelming because it pulls you into its story repeatedly. Mindfulness shifts attention from the story to the experience itself. Sensations in the body, emotions in the heart, thoughts in the mind. Observing these with gentleness reveals their impermanent nature. The storm of trauma, like all phenomena, changes moment by moment. Recognizing this impermanence is the first step in loosening its grip. Compassion is the next element. Trauma frequently leaves behind self-blame, the belief that you are stained by what happened. The lotus, however, remains unstained by the mud it grows from. This image teaches that you, too, are not defined by your trauma. Your essence remains clear. Compassion toward yourself begins to wash away the illusion of permanent damage. Each act of kindness toward your wounded self reinforces the truth that healing is possible. Resilience also comes through meaning. Trauma strips life of coherence, leaving events feeling random and senseless. The Lotus Sutra invites you to reinterpret suffering as part of the path, not as punishment, but as an opportunity to awaken qualities like patience, strength, and empathy. When suffering is given meaning, it loses some of its power to crush. The mud becomes not a weight, but a nutrient. Another dimension of the lotus teaching is patience. The lotus does not bloom overnight. It takes time to rise through mud and water. Trauma, too, requires patience. The urge to rush healing only creates frustration. Resilience means staying with the process, trusting that growth is occurring even when unseen. Each moment of mindfulness, each act of compassion, each step forward is part of the slow rise toward clarity. Community also plays a role in this resilience. Just as a pond holds many lotuses rising together, healing is often supported by others. Trauma isolates, convincing you that you are alone. But in reality, others also carry mud. Others also strive to bloom. Sharing your pain, receiving support, and witnessing the resilience of others all strengthen your own. Compassion flows both ways in such communities, creating collective resilience. The lotus metaphor also challenges the belief that resilience means erasing the past. The flower does not pretend the mud never existed. It grows because of it. Healing does not require forgetting or erasing trauma. It requires transforming your relationship to it. The memory may remain, but its meaning changes. It becomes a source of wisdom rather than a source of bondage. Resilience further involves balance between vulnerability and strength. The lotus is delicate yet enduring, exposed above water but rooted below. Trauma survivors often swing between extremes of closing off or being overwhelmed. The lotus teaches integration, remaining open to life while staying grounded in stability. This balance is cultivated through meditation, self-care, and the steady practice of awareness. Science echoes these teachings. Studies on post-traumatic growth show that many who endure hardship later report greater appreciation for life, deeper relationships, and stronger inner strength. This does not glorify trauma but affirms the possibility of transformation. The Lotus Sutra method reflects this truth. Out of suffering can come clarity and resilience. Practical exercises help anchor this resilience. In meditation, visualize a lotus rising from mud, each breath lifting it higher until it blooms in sunlight. Let this symbolize your own capacity to rise through pain. In daily life, when you encounter difficulty, remind yourself, this is mud, and mud can nourish growth. Such reminders shift perspective, turning obstacles into opportunities. Another practice is journaling with the lotus as a guide. Write about the mud in your life, the hardships, traumas, and struggles. Then reflect on the qualities that grew because of them: strength, empathy, patience. This practice reframes suffering, showing how it contributed to growth rather than only destruction. Resilience is not the absence of scars, but the ability to carry them with grace. The lotus may bear the memory of mud, but it opens to the sun without shame. You, too, can carry your past without letting it define you. Trauma may mark your journey, but it need not dictate your future. Through mindfulness, compassion, patience, and meaning, resilience blooms. As you rest now, let the image of the lotus settle in your heart. Feel the mud of your life not as an enemy but as soil for growth. Know that within you lies the same capacity to bloom unstained, to rise through adversity into clarity. The lotus does not ask for different conditions, it blooms where it is. You too can bloom here, in this life, in this very moment. This is the Lotus Sutra method of resilience: to embrace the mud without fear, to rise steadily through it, and to open fully to the light of clarity. Trauma becomes not the end of your story, but the fertile ground from which wisdom and strength arise. And like the lotus, your resilience becomes a symbol not only for yourself, but for all who see you, a living reminder that from the deepest mud, the purest beauty can grow. When the image of the lotus settles in the heart, showing that beauty can rise out of mud, the next question quietly appears. What happens when grief feels too heavy to rise above? There are times when tears cannot be held back, when the sorrow of your own life or the suffering of the world breaks open the heart. Buddhism does not ask you to suppress this grief. Instead, it points to its hidden power. The stories of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, teach that tears themselves can become the source of universal love. In the legends, it is said that Avalokiteshvara wept upon seeing the endless suffering of beings, and from those tears new forms of compassion were born. This imagery reveals that grief, far from being weakness, can open the door to boundless care for all beings. Tears are often seen as signs of fragility, but in Buddhist understanding they are evidence of a heart awake. When you cry for another, it shows you are not closed. Grief reveals connection. The pain you feel is proof that the boundary between self and other has softened. In that softening, compassion flows more freely. Avalokiteshvara's tears symbolize this truth, that sorrow, when fully embraced, becomes the seed of limitless love. This teaching is important because many carry shame about their grief. People believe they should be strong, as if strength means silence and suppression. But the Bodhisattva's example shows the opposite. Strength lies in allowing grief to deepen awareness. Instead of collapsing into despair, grief can be used as fuel for compassion. Each tear is a reminder that the heart is still alive, still capable of love. When you encounter suffering, your own or another's, the instinct may be to turn away. It can feel unbearable to witness pain. Yet Avalokiteshvara's tears teach that turning towards sorrow with openness transforms it. The act of facing suffering without denial is itself an expression of compassion. You see clearly, you feel deeply, and through that depth, love expands. On a personal level, grief often feels isolating. It convinces you that no one else can understand. But when grief is embraced as Avalokiteshvara embraced it, it becomes a bridge. You realize that grief is universal. Everyone loses, everyone suffers, everyone cries. Your tears connect you to the countless beings who have also wept. The isolation softens into solidarity. This recognition naturally gives rise to compassion that extends beyond yourself. In practice, this means allowing yourself to feel grief fully without rushing to fix it. Sit with the ache, let the tears fall, breathe into the heaviness. Notice that as you soften into the feeling, the heart expands rather than collapses. Instead of drowning, you float in the current of shared humanity. This shift marks the difference between despair and compassion. Despair closes the heart. Compassion opens it through the same doorway of grief. Avalokiteshvara's tears also symbolize resilience. The Bodhisattva does not weep and give up. The weeping becomes the birth of new strength. In the legend, from the tears arose new bodhisattvas who carried compassion into the world. This imagery teaches that grief, when honored, generates energy for action. Sorrow is not the end, it is the beginning of deeper engagement with life. This understanding changes how you approach global suffering. News of war, injustice, or disaster often overwhelms, leaving people numb. But numbness is not compassion, it is avoidance. If you allow yourself to feel sorrow, even briefly, it can stir the wish to alleviate suffering in whatever way you can. Whether through acts of kindness, advocacy, or prayer, grief becomes the wellspring of action. The Bodhisattva's tears remind us that tears themselves can water the seeds of love. In meditation, you can practice transforming grief into compassion directly. Bring to mind someone who suffers. Let yourself feel the ache in your chest, the sting in your eyes. Instead of resisting, breathe into it. Then, on the out-breath, send them love, relief, or peace. Repeat this with others, expanding the circle. Soon you notice that grief does not exhaust you but energizes you. Compassion grows with each breath. On a deeper level, Avalokiteshvara's tears speak to the nature of emptiness and interconnection. You cry because you are not separate. Their pain becomes your pain. This is not a burden but a realization of truth. To feel grief for another is to awaken to the web of being that holds all life. The tears are drops of that ocean of interconnection flowing naturally from awareness. Modern psychology also reflects this. Research on empathy shows that tears can trigger caregiving responses in others, strengthening bonds and trust. Grief shared openly often leads to deeper connection. Suppressed grief, by contrast, isolates and hardens. Avalokiteshvara's tears symbolize what science confirms. Vulnerability can deepen compassion, both within and between people. Another important aspect is that grief reveals love. You do not cry for what means nothing to you. Tears flow because you cared. This means that grief is not separate from love, but its shadow. The deeper the love, the deeper the grief. When understood this way, grief is honored rather than feared. It shows that love was real, that connection mattered, and from this recognition, universal love naturally expands. In family life, grief may arise from loss, estrangement, or disappointment. By meeting it with Avalokiteshvara's compassion, you can avoid passing pain forward. Instead of hardening or withdrawing, you allow grief to open you to gentleness. You break the chain of inherited pain by transforming it into kindness. The tears you shed become water for the seeds of healing in future generations. Practicing with grief also requires balance. It is possible to drown in sorrow if mindfulness is absent. The Bodhisattva's tears teach not collapse, but transformation. You allow the feeling fully, but you hold it in awareness. The awareness is what keeps the heart open rather than closed. This balance turns grief into compassion rather than despair. There is also an invitation here to trust your tears. Many people apologize when they cry, as if it were shameful. But Avalokiteshvara's story honors tears as sacred. When you cry for others, you participate in the Bodhisattva path. When you cry for yourself, you are still expressing compassion because you are a being worthy of care. Trusting your tears means trusting the heart's natural wisdom. The Bodhisattva's tears are also reminders that compassion is inexhaustible. Just as water flows endlessly, love can be renewed endlessly. Grief may seem to deplete you, but when transformed into compassion, it replenishes itself. This is why Avalokiteshvara is often depicted with 1,000 arms. Compassion multiplies, reaching everywhere. Your tears too can multiply into countless acts of care, touching lives you may never know. As the night deepens, let this truth take root in your heart. Grief is not the enemy of compassion, but its companion. The tears you shed are not signs of weakness, but of awakening. Through them, you are connected to every being who has ever suffered. Through them, you learn that love can expand without limit. Avalokiteshvara's tears invite you to stop resisting sorrow and to let it teach you. Let grief soften your heart, not harden it. Let it remind you of love, not of loss alone. Let it guide you to action, not despair. In this way, each tear becomes a seed of universal compassion, and from sorrow arises the deepest strength. This is the meaning of the Bodhisattva's tears, that grief itself, when embraced with awareness, opens the door to boundless love. It is through the breaking of the heart that the infinite heart is revealed. And in that revelation, you discover a compassion vast enough to hold the suffering of the world. When grief has been honored as a doorway to compassion, when tears are no longer signs of weakness but expressions of awakening, the heart begins to feel its vastness. Yet even vast compassion can tremble when storms of life return. Emotions surge, circumstances shift, and clarity can be shaken. In these moments, what keeps the heart steady? In the Buddhist path, vows serve as anchors. They are not merely words spoken once, but living commitments that ground the mind when everything else is unsteady. Whether monastic or personal, vows provide resilience, offering a compass when emotions threaten to pull you in every direction. A vow is different from a fleeting intention. An intention may arise in the moment, but fade with distraction. A vow is deeper, planted in the soil of determination. It becomes part of your identity, something you return to again and again. When storms of anger, fear, or despair arise, the vow reminds you of who you are and what you value most. In this way, vows are not constraints but liberations, freeing you from being at the mercy of every emotional wave. Vows create stability because they provide clarity of direction. Without them, emotions dictate your actions. One day you are generous, the next you are resentful. One day you are patient, the next you lash out. With a vow, you have a steady reference point. For example, if you vow to speak truthfully, then even in anger you remember that deceit is not an option. If you vow to practice compassion, then even in frustration you pause before causing harm. The vow anchors you, preventing temporary emotions from steering your life. Personal vows can be crafted for any stage of life. They need not be elaborate or tied to religious ceremony. They can be simple commitments aligned with your deepest values. A vow to return to the breath in moments of stress. A vow to meet anger with patience. A vow to forgive yourself when you stumble. Each vow is a thread of stability woven into daily life. Together, they form a net that holds you during emotional storms. Resilience grows when vows are tested. It is easy to keep a vow when conditions are calm. The true power of a vow is revealed when challenges arise. In moments of loss or conflict, the vow becomes a lifeline. It reminds you that even if emotions surge wildly, you have chosen a deeper ground to stand on. This repeated testing strengthens both the vow and the one who holds it. Like a tree whose roots deepen in strong winds, your resilience grows as you uphold your vows through difficulty. The act of taking a vow also transforms identity. When you declare, even silently, "I commit to compassion," you reshape your sense of self. The mind begins to align with this new identity. Over time, the vow becomes less an external rule and more an internal truth. You no longer force yourself to act kindly. You recognize yourself as someone who values kindness. This integration brings profound stability because it reduces the gap between who you want to be and how you act. Vows also reduce inner conflict. Much suffering arises from indecision. Should I act on this impulse? Should I resist? Should I compromise? A vow simplifies the choice. When temptation to act unskillfully arises, the vow provides clarity. The decision is already made. This simplicity frees mental energy for more constructive purposes, reducing the exhaustion of constant inner negotiation. In relationships, vows bring trust. When others know you have anchored yourself in certain commitments, they feel safer. A vow not to speak in anger, a vow to listen before judging, a vow to honor honesty, these strengthen bonds. Relationships flourish when people know they can rely on each other's stability. Vows become not only anchors for yourself, but for those around you. Buddhist tradition highlights vows of great scope, such as the Bodhisattva vows to save all beings. Yet even these vast vows begin with small acts. A vow to relieve the suffering of those near you, a vow to bring patience to your family, a vow to cultivate peace in your daily interactions. These are expressions of the same spirit. Large or small, vows expand your capacity to remain steady. A powerful practice is to reflect each day on your vows. In the morning, recall them to set the tone of the day. In the evening, reflect on how you lived them, not with judgment but with awareness. Each reflection strengthens commitment. Over time, vows become less effortful and more natural, like breathing. They are no longer tasks to remember, but qualities of your being. Science supports the stabilizing effect of commitments. Research shows that people who articulate clear values and goals are more resilient under stress. They recover more quickly from setbacks and experience less anxiety. This mirrors the Buddhist understanding that vows provide coherence and direction, preventing emotions from scattering the mind. It is important, however, to distinguish vows from rigid rules. Rigidity leads to self-punishment when vows are broken. True vows are held with compassion. When you stumble, you do not abandon the vow or condemn yourself. You return to it gently, recommitting. The vow remains steady even when you falter, like a lighthouse that continues to shine regardless of storms. Vows also help in transforming trauma. When old wounds resurface, emotions can feel overwhelming. A vow to meet trauma with patience, to seek healing rather than avoidance, provides direction. Instead of being pulled back into cycles of reactivity, you have a path forward. The vow keeps you from being swallowed by old pain, reminding you that healing is possible and chosen. In practice, vows can be linked to mindfulness. Each time you breathe, you recall a vow. For example, as you inhale, you remember, "I vow to bring kindness." As you exhale, "I release harm." Linking vows to breath makes them living, embodied commitments rather than abstract ideas. This integration deepens their stabilizing power. Vows also expand resilience by connecting you to something larger than yourself. When you vow to cultivate compassion or truth, you align with timeless qualities valued by countless practitioners across generations. This connection reduces the sense of isolation. You realize you are part of a lineage of human beings who have anchored themselves in similar commitments. This shared sense of purpose strengthens your resolve. As life continues, vows evolve. Early vows may be about personal stability, patience, honesty, mindfulness. Later, vows may expand outward service, justice, universal compassion. Each stage builds upon the previous, deepening resilience. The beauty of vows is that they are not static. They grow with you, always providing stability suited to your present path. As you rest now, let this truth settle. Emotions will always rise and fall like storms, but vows are anchors that hold you steady. They are the roots that keep you grounded, the compass that keeps you true, the light that guides you through darkness. Vows do not remove suffering, but they prevent you from being lost within it. They give shape to resilience, turning fragile intention into enduring strength. In this way, vows become more than promises. They are living expressions of your deepest values, anchors of emotional stability that allow you to meet life's storms with clarity, courage, and grace. When vows are embraced as anchors, the heart discovers a steady ground to return to, no matter how rough the seas of life become. Yet even with commitments guiding us, emotions continue to rise and fall. Some days bring joy, others bring sorrow. Some moments bring praise, others bring blame. Without balance, the mind is thrown back and forth, exhausted by extremes. This is why the practice of equanimity, known in Buddhism as upekkha, is essential. It is the discipline of meeting all experiences, pleasant or painful, flattering or condemning, with the same steady heart. Equanimity is often misunderstood as indifference, but it is not coldness, not withdrawal, not apathy. It is the warm strength of staying centered when circumstances shift. It is a mind unshaken, not because it feels nothing, but because it refuses to be enslaved by temporary highs and lows. Equanimity allows you to care deeply without being consumed, to engage fully without clinging, to remain open without losing balance. The mind without equanimity is like a leaf in the wind, tossed by every gust of emotion. A compliment makes you soar, a criticism makes you collapse. Pleasure leads to attachment, pain leads to despair. This instability drains energy and clouds clarity. With equanimity, you become more like a rooted tree. Wind still blows, but the trunk remains steady. The branches move, but the roots hold. Life continues to change, but your center does not collapse with each shift. One of the greatest challenges to equanimity is attachment to outcomes. You hope for success, fear failure, crave approval, resist rejection. Each attachment creates vulnerability to suffering. Equanimity does not deny desire, but it teaches you to hold outcomes lightly. You work diligently, you give sincerely, but you release clinging to results. Whether praised or blamed, you remain steady because your worth is not tied to external judgment. In relationships, equanimity transforms dynamics. Without it, love may become possessive, dependent on constant affirmation. With equanimity, love is free, caring without clinging, supportive without suffocating. This balance prevents compassion from collapsing into enabling or withdrawal. You are able to stay present with another's joy or sorrow without being destabilized by it. Equanimity also shifts how you relate to your own mind. Joy, sorrow, praise, blame, these appear internally as thoughts and feelings. Without balance, you chase some and fight others. With equanimity, you watch them come and go without panic. Thoughts are like clouds passing across the sky of awareness. They arise, they drift, they dissolve. The sky does not cling to clouds, nor does it resist them. Your mind, with equanimity, learns to rest in this same openness. The discipline of equanimity is cultivated through practice. Meditation on the four immeasurables, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity balances the heart. When you extend kindness and compassion, you feel warmth. When you cultivate joy in others' happiness, you feel expansion. But only with equanimity do you gain the strength to hold all these qualities without collapse. Equanimity protects love from turning into attachment, compassion from turning into burnout, joy from turning into envy. It steadies the immeasurables so they remain boundless. Daily life offers countless opportunities to train equanimity. When praised, notice the warmth, but remind yourself, this too is impermanent. When criticized, notice the sting, but remind yourself, this too will pass. When joy arises, savor it without clinging. When sorrow arrives, hold it without despair. Each moment becomes practice in staying steady amidst change. Over time, balance grows stronger, like a muscle strengthened through repeated use. Equanimity also requires wisdom. It rests on the understanding that all experiences are transient, conditioned, and not self. Joy and sorrow are not permanent truths, they are passing states. Praise and blame are reflections of others' perceptions, not the measure of your being. With this wisdom, you see that reacting strongly to each fluctuation is unnecessary. You engage with life fully, but you do not mistake passing weather for the nature of the sky. One challenge is that equanimity can feel unnatural at first. The mind is used to reacting, to chasing what feels good and fleeing what feels bad. Training in equanimity feels like going against habit. But just as physical training strengthens the body, this mental training strengthens the heart. Each time you remain steady in the face of extremes, you deepen resilience. Modern psychology echoes this. Research on emotional regulation shows that balance leads to greater well-being, resilience, and clarity of decision-making. People who maintain equanimity are less prone to anxiety, depression, and burnout. They are better able to adapt to stress and to sustain compassion without exhaustion. These findings align with what Buddhism has taught for centuries. Balance of mind is not luxury but necessity for liberation. Equanimity also deepens compassion. Without it, compassion risks becoming overwhelming. When faced with another's suffering, you may absorb it until you collapse. Equanimity allows you to stay open-hearted while remaining grounded. You care deeply, but you do not drown. This balance enables compassion to be sustained over time, making it stronger, not weaker. Another dimension is equanimity toward yourself. Self-criticism and self-praise are equally unstable. One moment you feel superior, the next inferior. Equanimity teaches you to meet both with the same balance. You acknowledge mistakes without self-hatred. You recognize successes without arrogance. This steadiness frees you from the endless cycle of self-judgment, creating space for genuine growth. Equanimity also plays a role in spiritual practice itself. Progress on the path is not linear. Some days bring clarity, others confusion. Some meditations feel deep, others restless. Without equanimity, you grow attached to progress and despair at setbacks. With equanimity, you accept both as part of the path. This acceptance sustains practice over the long term, preventing burnout and disappointment. Practical exercises for equanimity include mindfulness of breath and body. Each inhale and exhale rises and falls. Noticing this impermanence trains the mind to accept change. Another practice is repeating phrases such as, "I will meet joy and sorrow with balance. I will meet praise and blame with steadiness." These phrases remind the heart of its commitment to equanimity, strengthening resolve. In relationships, equanimity may be practiced by listening without immediately reacting. When praised, simply thank the person without clinging. When criticized, listen for any truth without collapsing. When others are joyful, share in their happiness without envy. When others are suffering, stay present without drowning in their pain. This balance makes you a source of stability for those around you. Equanimity also brings freedom. Without it, you are enslaved by circumstances, constantly pushed and pulled. With it, you gain independence, not from life, but from reactivity. You remain fully engaged, yet inwardly free. This freedom allows you to live with greater authenticity, guided by values rather than impulses. As the night deepens, let this truth rest in your heart. Life will always bring joy and sorrow, praise and blame, gain and loss. You cannot control the winds, but you can root yourself in balance. Equanimity is not indifference, but the steady strength to remain open, no matter what comes. It is the discipline that keeps the heart free, the clarity that keeps compassion alive, the balance that transforms storms into teachers. This is the discipline of equanimity, to meet every rise and fall with the same steady gaze, to remain rooted in wisdom and compassion while the world turns. It is not escape from life, but full presence within it, unshaken and free. When the mind is trained in equanimity, the waves of joy and sorrow, praise and blame no longer drag you into extremes. Balance becomes your foundation. Yet even with balance, wounds from the past and fears of the future can still color perception. The present moment is often overshadowed by memories that cling or anxieties that press forward. To heal more deeply, the Buddhist path invites you to see through time itself, to look back at the self you once were, to look forward to the self yet to come, and to recognize that none of these selves are fixed. Emotional wounds, no matter how heavy, are not eternal truths. They are conditions that change, like all things. The mind tends to freeze painful moments into permanent identities. A harsh criticism becomes, "I am worthless." A betrayal becomes, "I will never trust again." These statements feel timeless, as if carved into stone. But when you contemplate the flow of time, you realize they are only snapshots. The self that was criticized is not the self who stands here now. The pain that felt eternal has already shifted countless times. By widening perspective across time, wounds lose their solidity. Looking into the past, you see that your identity has always been fluid. The child you once were, the adolescent, the adult in different phases, each was shaped by conditions, and each gave way to the next. None of them lasted, yet each felt real in the moment. This reflection reveals that your current sense of self, wounded or not, is also transient. The me you feel today will shift again, just as all former versions did. This realization loosens the grip of pain, showing it to be a passing state rather than a fixed identity. Future contemplation extends this insight. You imagine the self you may become older, wiser, perhaps more peaceful. This is not fantasy, but recognition of potential. Just as you changed from the past, you will change again. The wounds of today may become tomorrow's lessons. By contemplating the self you could grow into, you plant seeds of healing. You begin to align choices with the future you wish to embody, rather than staying trapped in the shadow of the past. This practice reveals the impermanence of wounds. They feel permanent only when viewed in isolation, but when placed within the continuum of time, they shrink into moments. A heartbreak that once seemed unbearable becomes a memory softened by years. A failure that crushed your confidence becomes a story you tell with humor. What feels overwhelming today will not hold the same power forever. By remembering this, you find patience and hope. Seeing through time also deepens compassion. When you look at your past self, you may feel tenderness for the younger you who struggled. Instead of harsh judgment, you offer kindness. You were doing your best with what you knew. This compassion for the past self extends naturally to others. Just as you can forgive your younger self for not knowing better, you can forgive others who act from ignorance. Everyone is caught in the flow of time, learning as they go. This perspective also heals fear of the future. Anxiety often arises from imagining a fixed, catastrophic outcome. You believe, "I will always feel this way," or "my future will be ruined." But by reflecting on the fluidity of self, you see that no single future is inevitable. Just as the past surprised you with changes you could not foresee, the future holds possibilities beyond current fear. This openness dissolves rigid anxiety, allowing space for trust. Meditation on past and future selves can be practiced directly. Begin by recalling a painful memory. See your younger self in that moment. Notice their fear, sadness, or confusion. Then, with compassion, tell them what you know now. That they survived, that they grew, that they were not as alone as they felt. This reframe does not erase the pain but transforms your relationship to it. You become both the wounded and the healer, bridging time with compassion. Next, bring to mind your future self. Picture them not as fantasy, but as the natural result of continued growth. See them calmer, stronger, more at peace. Let this image guide your present actions. Ask, what would this future self thank me for doing today? Each choice aligned with that vision weakens the hold of current wounds. This practice reveals that healing is not linear, but layered. Sometimes the past resurfaces, and you feel as if you are back where you started. But by remembering the impermanence of self, you realize even the recurrence is different. You are not the same person who first felt that wound. Each return is an opportunity to meet it with more wisdom, more patience, more compassion. Science echoes this view. Research in psychology shows that memory is not fixed. It is reconstructed each time you recall it. By reflecting with new insight, you literally reshape the memory, weakening its hold. Neuroscience also shows that the brain is plastic, capable of rewiring itself throughout life. This means that your emotional patterns are not permanent. Seeing through time is not only spiritual wisdom, but biological reality. Contemplating time also cultivates humility. You realize that your current perspective is limited. Just as past versions of yourself could not see today clearly, your present self cannot fully see the future. This humility softens certainty in your despair. You admit, "I do not know what is yet to come." And in that not knowing lies freedom. The future is open, and openness is fertile ground for healing. Another benefit of seeing through time is gratitude. When you look back at hardships that once seemed unbearable, you notice the growth they produced. Gratitude arises not for the pain itself, but for the resilience it cultivated, the wisdom it forced, the compassion it deepened. Gratitude shifts wounds from meaningless suffering into part of a larger journey. The practice also strengthens resilience in the present. When pain arises, you remind yourself, this is not forever. I have changed before, I will change again. This reminder prevents collapse into despair. It builds trust in your own capacity to grow through difficulty. Resilience is not the absence of pain, but the refusal to believe pain is permanent. Community supports this perspective. Sharing stories across generations reveals how lives transform in ways no one could predict. Listening to elders speak of their struggles or to peers who have grown through hardship reinforces the truth that time changes everything. Your wounds, too, will transform in the context of time. As you rest now, let this teaching seep into your heart. You are not fixed. The self you were is gone. The self you will be has not yet arrived. And even the self you feel now is already changing. Wounds are moments, not prisons. Grief is a season, not eternity. Fear is a wave, not the ocean. Healing by seeing through time means reclaiming the vast perspective that pain narrows. It means remembering that every self is transient, every wound is passing, every future is open. It means meeting the past with compassion, the present with patience, and the future with trust. In this way, you discover that time itself can be a healer, not by erasing what happened, but by revealing its impermanence. Through the flow of time, wounds lose their solidity, compassion deepens, and freedom becomes possible. When the flow of time is seen clearly, wounds lose their sense of permanence, and the heart learns to soften toward both past and future selves. Yet even with this wider view, traces of old pain often remain in the body and mind. Memories still echo, emotions still return, patterns still repeat. Understanding their impermanence helps, but sometimes thought alone cannot dissolve the weight they leave behind. This is where sound enters the path. In Buddhism and many other traditions, the practice of mantra is used as medicine for the heart. Through repetition of sacred syllables, mental patterns are reshaped, and heavy residue of suffering is cleared, not through analysis but through vibration, rhythm, and presence. A mantra is more than a word. It is a sound infused with centuries of intention, designed not for meaning alone, but for resonance. When spoken or chanted, it engages the body, breath, and mind together. The repetition creates rhythm, and rhythm creates stability. The restless mind, which often fuels emotional suffering, becomes absorbed in the cadence. The sound acts as a container, holding scattered thoughts until they settle naturally. What makes mantra powerful is its ability to bypass overthinking. Emotions often cling because the mind feeds them with endless stories: why this happened, what it means, how it will return. A mantra interrupts this cycle. Instead of fueling stories, you direct energy into sound. Each repetition replaces a thought, clearing space in the mind. Over time, the emotional charge weakens, not because you suppressed it, but because you stopped feeding it with mental commentary. Mantras also reshape inner patterns through neuroplasticity. Repetition builds pathways in the brain. When the repeated sound is connected with peace, compassion, or clarity, those qualities become embedded in your nervous system. The more you chant, the more natural those qualities become. Just as repeating negative thoughts reinforces suffering, repeating sacred sound reinforces healing. One of the most well-known Buddhist mantras is Om Mani Padme Hum, associated with Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Each syllable is said to purify different aspects of being: transforming ignorance into wisdom, hatred into love, and attachment into openness. Chanting this mantra is not about magical thinking. It is about aligning your entire being with the qualities of compassion it embodies. With repetition, your heart learns to vibrate with compassion naturally. Mantra practice also engages the body in healing. The vibration of sound resonates through the chest and throat, releasing tension stored in these areas. Trauma often leaves constriction in the body, tightness in the breath, heaviness in the chest. Chanting loosens these knots. The physical sensation of vibration becomes a massage for the nervous system, soothing anxiety and grounding the mind. Breath is central to mantra practice. Each chant links sound with exhalation, extending and deepening the breath. Shallow breathing fuels anxiety. Deep rhythmic breathing calms it. By pairing sound with breath, mantra anchors you in calm. Over time, even silent repetition aligns with this deeper breathing pattern, creating inner steadiness. Another aspect of mantra is its collective power. When chanted in groups, the resonance multiplies. The shared sound weaves voices into one field, dissolving separation. You feel held by the vibration of others, supported in healing. For many, this communal chanting opens the heart more quickly than solitary practice, reminding them that healing is not only personal, but shared. Mantra also helps dissolve self-criticism. Harsh inner voices are often repetitive, echoing old judgments. Mantra replaces those loops with sacred sound. Instead of "I am not enough," you repeat "Om Mani Padme Hum." Instead of cycling in shame, you vibrate with compassion. Over time, the old inner voices lose dominance, replaced by resonance that heals rather than harms. This practice is flexible. Mantras can be spoken aloud, whispered, or repeated silently. Each method carries benefit. Aloud, the vibration is felt in the body. Whispered, it is intimate, like a secret prayer. Silent repetition allows you to practice anywhere, transforming daily activities into meditation. The key is rhythm and presence, not volume. Mantras also serve as anchors during emotional storms. When grief surges, repeating a mantra steadies the mind, giving it something to hold. When anger rises, the mantra cools the fire by interrupting reactive thoughts. When fear overwhelms, the mantra becomes a lifeline, guiding breath and awareness back to the present. Over time, the mind begins to call on the mantra automatically in times of stress, just as a body remembers how to breathe in crisis. The transformative power of mantra is linked to intention. Sound without awareness becomes mechanical. But when each repetition is infused with sincerity, the mantra becomes alive. Intention gives the sound its healing power. Chanting Om Mani Padme Hum while calling forth compassion for yourself and others reshapes both heart and mind. Different mantras carry different qualities. Some are for peace, others for protection, others for clarity. Choosing a mantra aligned with your current need allows healing to be personalized. For someone carrying anger, a compassion mantra may soften the heart. For someone plagued by anxiety, a mantra for calm may ground the breath. The adaptability of mantra makes it a versatile medicine. Science also supports the healing effect of repetitive sound. Studies show that chanting slows heart rate, lowers blood pressure, and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms stress. Neuroimaging reveals that repetition of sacred syllables quiets the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for self-referential thinking and rumination. In simple terms, mantra literally silences the noise of overthinking, creating space for peace. Mantra practice can be integrated into daily life. A few minutes in the morning sets the tone for the day. Repetition while walking aligns steps with sound, creating harmony of body and mind. Silent chanting during stressful moments turns obstacles into practice. Over time, the mantra becomes part of your inner landscape, available at any moment. For trauma survivors, mantra can be especially healing. Trauma often shatters trust in words because words were used as weapons or failed to protect. Mantra bypasses ordinary language, using sound not for meaning but for resonance. This allows healing without the need for narrative. The body absorbs the vibration, the breath calms, the mind steadies. Healing happens not through story but through rhythm. The healing effect of mantra also extends beyond the individual. When you chant with compassion, you send out vibrations of goodwill. Even if others do not hear, the energy of your intention ripples outward. Chanting becomes both personal healing and service to the world. The heart expands, no longer limited to self, resonating with universal compassion. As the night deepens, let this teaching rest within you. Emotional wounds may leave residue, but sound has the power to clear it. Mantra is not escape, but medicine, not superstition, but practice. Each repetition reshapes the mind, soothes the body, and opens the heart. The medicine is simple. One sound, repeated with sincerity. Over time, the weight you carry grows lighter. The mind no longer circles endlessly. The heart vibrates with peace. This is mantra as medicine for the heart, a path of healing through sound, rhythm, and resonance, carrying you toward clarity and compassion, one syllable at a time. When the rhythm of mantra begins to clear the heaviness from the heart, the mind grows quieter and more receptive. The repetition of sacred sound softens old patterns, and what once felt sharp begins to lose its edge. Yet beneath the surface of many wounds lies a subtle thread that still binds, the identification with the story of hurt. The phrase, "I was hurt," becomes a definition rather than a description. It settles into the core of identity, shaping how you see yourself, how you relate to others, and how you live in the world. The teaching of emptiness invites a different perspective. It shows that identity, like all phenomena, is not fixed. By loosening the identification with "I was hurt," you create space for forgiveness, for freedom, and for a life not determined by the wound. Trauma often convinces you that it is who you are. The memory becomes fused with self-image. Instead of "a painful event happened," the mind clings to "I am broken." This identification is understandable because trauma leaves such strong impressions in the body and mind. But when the sense of self fuses with the event, suffering deepens. You replay the story endlessly, reinforcing the identity each time. The wound becomes not an experience of the past, but a permanent lens for the present. The Buddha's teaching on emptiness dismantles this illusion. Emptiness does not mean nothingness, it means lack of inherent, fixed self. Everything arises through conditions, including identity. "I was hurt" is not an eternal truth, but a conditioned statement. The pain arose because of circumstances, because of causes and conditions. Those conditions changed, and so too does the self that experienced them. The person you are today is not identical to the one who was hurt in the past. Every cell, every thought, every breath has shifted countless times since then. To realize this is to weaken the grip of identification. This realization opens space for healing. When you see that the wound is not your essence, forgiveness becomes possible. Forgiveness does not erase what happened, but it allows you to stop binding your entire being to it. You begin to recognize yourself as more than your pain. You are awareness, resilience, compassion, possibility. Trauma becomes part of your story, but not the totality of it. This shift transforms how you relate to memory. Instead of drowning in it, you can hold it with gentleness and let it pass. Loosening identification also frees relationships. When you cling to "I was hurt," you may project the wound onto every interaction. You distrust, you guard, you expect betrayal. By recognizing the emptiness of identity, you reduce these projections. Others are no longer seen through the narrow lens of your wound. You meet them more openly, with less fear. Forgiveness becomes not only inward, but outward, as you release the grip of resentment toward those who caused harm. The process of loosening identification requires mindfulness. Each time the mind repeats the story, "I was hurt," pause and notice. Is this memory arising now, or am I reliving the past? Is this my essence, or just a thought, a sensation, a memory? By questioning in this way, you begin to separate identity from experience. The wound becomes something you observe rather than something you are. Meditation on emptiness can deepen this shift. Sit quietly and bring to mind the thought, "I was hurt." Notice how it appears as words, sensations, images. Ask, where is the I in this? Can you find a fixed self behind the memory? Or do you find only thoughts, feelings, sensations that come and go? The more you look, the less solid the I appears. This is not denial, but direct investigation. And in that investigation, the sense of being permanently defined by hurt begins to dissolve. This practice does not mean ignoring pain. The memory of trauma may still arise, and the body may still carry echoes. But instead of saying, "This is me," you learn to say, "This is passing through me." The distinction is subtle but profound. It shifts you from fusion to spaciousness. Pain continues to exist, but it no longer imprisons the self. Science supports this approach. Trauma research shows that identification with victimhood prolongs suffering, while reframing experiences reduces their power. Neuroscience demonstrates that memories are reconstructed each time they are recalled. By approaching them with awareness of emptiness, you literally reshape how the brain encodes them. Over time, the memory remains but loses its identity-binding force. Forgiveness, too, is illuminated by emptiness. When you see that both you and those who harmed you are conditioned beings, shaped by ignorance and causes beyond full control, resentment softens. You may still hold boundaries, but hatred lessens. Forgiveness arises not as an act of willpower, but as the natural result of understanding emptiness. Both you and others are more than the harm that occurred. This shift also supports freedom in the present. As long as "I was hurt" defines you, you are trapped in the past. By loosening identification, you reclaim the present moment. You can experience joy without guilt, love without constant suspicion, peace without fear of its fragility. The wound remains part of your history, but not your prison. Practical exercises help integrate this understanding. Journaling can reveal how often "I was hurt" appears as identity. Each time it arises, reframe, "This was an experience, not my essence." Another practice is compassion meditation, directed toward your younger self. By sending kindness to the one who suffered, you acknowledge the wound while freeing your present self from being fused with it. Community can also support this healing. Hearing others share their stories of loosening identification reminds you that it is possible. Trauma may whisper that you are alone, but shared stories show that others too have released the grip of "I was hurt" and discovered freedom. Ultimately, emptiness of identity reveals that you are not fixed. You are a process, a flow, a being in constant change. Trauma is one chapter, not the entire book. Forgiveness is possible because identity is fluid. Freedom is possible because the self is not bound to any single moment. As the night deepens, let this truth settle into your heart. You are not your wound. You are not permanently defined by what happened. "I was hurt" is a memory, not your essence. By loosening identification, you open space for forgiveness, compassion, and freedom. The past remains, but it no longer dictates the present. This is the healing power of emptiness in trauma. to free you from the prison of identity, to soften the grip of resentment, to open the heart to forgiveness, and to reveal the spaciousness in which all wounds can dissolve. When identity is no longer chained to the story of hurt, a great freedom opens. The weight of "I was hurt" loosens, and forgiveness becomes possible. Yet even with this freedom, emotions still rise and fall in the flow of daily life. Anger, sadness, longing, and fear continue to appear because they are part of being human. The challenge is not whether they arise, but how you meet them. Many fall into two extremes: repressing emotions, burying them deep in silence, or indulging them, letting them overflow unchecked. Both paths create suffering. The Buddha's teaching of the middle way offers another option: meeting emotions with balance, neither suppressing nor overfeeding them, but allowing them to flow through in a way that releases their weight. Repression may seem like strength, but it is a brittle strength. To push feelings down is to deny their presence, yet what is denied does not disappear. It hides in the body, in tension and illness, in sudden bursts of anger or sadness that seem out of proportion. Repression may protect you in the short term, but over time it hardens the heart, making it less flexible, less alive. Indulgence, on the other hand, may seem like honesty, but it can enslave you. To give every emotion free rein is to let them control your actions and words. Anger can become cruelty, grief can become despair, desire can become obsession. Indulgence turns passing states into destructive cycles. What begins as expression becomes reinforcement, deepening the grooves of suffering in the mind. The middle way avoids both traps. It invites you to acknowledge emotions fully, to feel them without shame or denial, but also to hold them with mindfulness so they do not consume you. This balance transforms emotions into teachers rather than tyrants. Anger reveals where boundaries were crossed. Sadness shows where love or meaning was lost. Fear points to attachment or vulnerability. Desire reflects longing for connection or fulfillment. When seen clearly, each emotion carries wisdom. The middle way is the path of listening to that wisdom without being ruled by it. Mindfulness is the foundation of this balance. To practice the middle way in emotional expression, you learn to observe emotions as they arise. Instead of pushing them away or amplifying them, you watch them like waves. You feel the rise, the peak, the fall. You notice the sensations in the body, the thoughts that accompany them, the urges they bring. By staying present, you interrupt the automatic habits of repression and indulgence. You let the wave pass naturally, without denying it or feeding it. Breath is a powerful tool here. When emotions surge, the breath often becomes shallow or irregular. By returning attention to steady breathing, you create space around the emotion. This space is what allows balance. The breath does not erase the feeling, but it gives the mind room to respond rather than react. Each inhale is acknowledgement, each exhale is release. The middle way also honors the importance of skillful expression. To express emotions does not mean to dump them on others without care. It means finding ways to share truthfully and responsibly. For example, instead of shouting in anger, you may say, "I feel hurt by what happened." Instead of collapsing in grief alone, you may share your sorrow with a trusted friend or through creative expression like writing or art. Balanced expression acknowledges the reality of the emotion while avoiding harm to yourself or others. Cultural influences often complicate this. In some cultures, emotions are expected to be hidden. In others, they are dramatized. The middle way is not dictated by culture but by mindfulness. It asks, does this expression reduce suffering or does it increase it? Does this way of holding my anger, sadness, or joy bring clarity, or does it deepen confusion? These questions guide you toward balance, regardless of external expectations. Science confirms the harm of both extremes. Studies show that repression of emotions increases stress, weakens immunity, and leads to long-term health issues. Indulgence, such as rumination on anger or sadness, reinforces negative pathways in the brain, making it harder to recover. Balanced expression, by contrast, correlates with resilience, healthier relationships, and greater emotional intelligence. This mirrors what Buddhist practice has taught for centuries. Balance is healing. A key part of the middle way is non-identification. You acknowledge emotions without making them your identity. Instead of, "I am angry," you learn to say, "Anger is present." Instead of, "I am broken," you say, "Sadness is moving through me." This shift in language reflects the shift in awareness. You are not the emotion, you are the awareness that notices it. This perspective allows you to express feelings without being consumed by them. Compassion also plays a central role. When emotions arise, especially those linked to old wounds, the tendency is often to judge yourself. "I should not feel this." Judgment only deepens repression. Compassion offers a gentler approach. It is human to feel this. With compassion, you allow emotions space to exist without shame. This acceptance itself becomes healing. Equanimity, cultivated earlier, strengthens this practice. Balance of mind allows you to meet both pleasant and unpleasant emotions with steadiness. You savor joy without clinging. You feel sorrow without drowning. You hear praise without arrogance. You receive blame without collapse. Equanimity and the middle way work together. One provides the stability, the other the method. Practical exercises bring this teaching to life. One is noting practice. When an emotion arises, simply note it silently. Anger, sadness, fear. This prevents repression by acknowledging the feeling, and it prevents indulgence by reducing identification. Another exercise is body scanning. Notice where the emotion resides physically: tightness in the chest, heat in the face, heaviness in the stomach. By feeling the sensation directly, you release the need to act it out or push it down. Another practice is journaling with awareness. Write about the emotion honestly, but then reflect. What is its root? What is it asking for? What can I learn from it? This turns expression into investigation, transforming emotions into sources of wisdom rather than sources of harm. The middle way also applies to positive emotions. Joy, excitement, and love can also lead to suffering if indulged without balance. Clinging to joy makes its loss painful. Overindulgence in excitement can lead to recklessness. The middle way invites you to enjoy fully but lightly, to savor without clinging, to love without possession. This balance allows happiness to enrich life without becoming another cause of suffering. In community, practicing the middle way creates harmony. When people repress emotions, they grow distant. When they indulge, they create conflict. Balanced expression fosters trust. You share enough to be authentic, but not so much that you overwhelm others. You listen with openness, respond with care, and hold space for both your own emotions and those of others. Over time, practicing the middle way reshapes your relationship to all emotions. They cease to be threats or masters. They become companions on the path, sometimes difficult, sometimes joyful, always transient. You stop fearing them or chasing them, and instead you learn from them. This transforms life from a battlefield into a classroom, where every feeling becomes a teacher. As the night deepens, let this truth rest in your heart. Emotions are not enemies, nor are they rulers. They are waves in the ocean of being, rising and falling. To repress them is to dam the river. To indulge them is to be swept away. To follow the middle way is to float with balance, feeling the current without drowning in it. This is the practice of the middle way in emotional expression. acknowledging without suppression, expressing without indulgence, holding every feeling with mindful balance. In this path lies the release of pain, the freedom of presence, and the wisdom to live with clarity and compassion in every moment. When the middle way in emotional expression is practiced, the heart learns not to push feelings into silence, nor to drown in their intensity. Balance begins to emerge, and pain is released more gently. Yet even with this wisdom, there remains a quieter, more persistent voice that many struggle with daily, the inner critic. This voice can be harsher than any external enemy, striking with words that cut deeper than others could. It says you are not enough, that you always fail, that your flaws outweigh your worth. To meet this voice with hostility only strengthens it, and to repress it leaves it lurking in the shadows. The Buddhist path offers another approach, compassion toward the enemy within. By recognizing that the inner critic is not a monster but a misguided protector, you can transform it into an ally and dissolve its power. The first step is to understand where this voice comes from. No one is born criticizing themselves. The inner critic develops from conditions, harsh environments, unmet needs, cultural expectations, repeated patterns of shame. In childhood, criticism may have been used as control. In adulthood, it becomes internalized, repeating like an echo. Instead of protecting you, it often harms you. Yet when viewed with non-dual awareness, you see that even this harsh voice arises from a kind of misguided care. It seeks to keep you safe, to prevent rejection, to push you toward improvement. Its methods are clumsy, but its roots are not malice. This perspective changes the way you relate to the critic. Instead of calling it an enemy, you begin to see it as a frightened guardian. It is like a child trying to protect with anger because it knows no other way. By meeting it with compassion, you disarm it. The critic loses its sharpness when it is understood rather than fought. Mindfulness is essential here. When the critic speaks, pause and notice. Instead of merging with its words, "I am worthless," you recognize the inner critic is speaking. This small shift creates distance. You no longer take its voice as truth. You hear it as a conditioned pattern. From this space, you can respond with compassion rather than automatic agreement. One way to practice is through reframing. When the critic says, "You will fail," respond gently. "I see you want me to succeed, but I can learn without fear." When it says, "You are not enough," answer, "I understand you are afraid of rejection, but I am worthy as I am." This reframing acknowledges the critic's intention protection while refusing its harmful method. Over time, the voice softens. Compassion toward the inner critic is grounded in Buddhist non-duality. Non-duality teaches that divisions like enemy and self are illusions. The critic is not separate from you. To hate it is to deepen division within your own mind. To embrace it is to integrate what has been split. Healing comes not from destroying parts of yourself, but from uniting them in awareness. The critic is not the other. It is part of the self-seeking care. Forgiveness plays a role here as well. Many carry resentment toward their inner critic, blaming it for years of pain. But forgiveness allows you to see that the critic arose from ignorance and fear, not malice. Just as you forgive others for harming you out of their own suffering, you forgive the critic. This forgiveness dissolves hostility, creating room for kindness. Meditation supports this healing. In metta practice, extend loving kindness not only to others but to yourself, including the critic. Silently repeat, "May I be safe, may I be free from fear, may I be at peace." As these phrases repeat, let them touch the harsh voice inside. With time, the critic begins to absorb this kindness, transforming from enemy to ally. Another practice is visualization. Picture the critic as a younger version of yourself, perhaps as a frightened child. Instead of pushing it away, hold it in compassion. Speak gently. "Thank you for trying to protect me," I see your fear, I will care for you. This visualization reframes the critic not as a tyrant, but as a wounded part of the self in need of care. The body reveals much about the critic's presence. It often shows up as tension in the chest, tightening in the throat, heaviness in the stomach. When these sensations arise, place a hand on the area, breathe, and silently offer compassion. This physical gesture grounds the practice, showing the critic that its fear is acknowledged without judgment. Science affirms this approach. Research on self-compassion shows that those who treat themselves with kindness rather than self-criticism have greater resilience, lower anxiety, and stronger motivation. Contrary to the critic's belief, harshness does not create lasting growth, compassion does. This aligns with the Buddhist insight that wisdom and compassion are inseparable. True clarity cannot exist without kindness. Community also aids in healing the critic. When you share your struggles openly, you realize others carry similar voices. This shared recognition dissolves shame. The critic often thrives in secrecy, convincing you that its words are unique to you. But in community, you learn that the critic is a common condition of the human mind. Compassion grows naturally when you see your struggle reflected in others. Over time, compassion toward the inner critic creates a shift. The voice may not disappear entirely, but it changes character. It becomes less harsh, more like guidance than attack. It no longer dominates your mind. You can hear it, understand its roots, and respond with balance. The critic becomes integrated, part of the self, but no longer destructive. This transformation mirrors the larger Buddhist path. Suffering, when met with awareness and compassion, becomes the ground of wisdom. The inner critic, once seen as an enemy, becomes a teacher. It shows you where fear still lingers, where healing is still needed. By reframing it as misguided protection, you turn a source of suffering into a source of growth. As the night deepens, let this teaching settle in your heart. The harshest voice within you is not your enemy. It is a part of you longing for safety, using the only methods it knows. By meeting it with compassion, you free yourself from its grip. You are not at war with yourself. You are learning to embrace yourself fully. This is the practice of compassion toward the enemy within. To hear the critic without hatred, to reframe it as misguided care, to integrate it into the whole of your being. In this integration lies healing, forgiveness, and freedom, the freedom to live not as divided fragments but as a compassionate whole. All throughout this journey, you've walked through the wisdom of the Buddha, emptiness that dissolves isolation, the alchemy that turns suffering into compassion, the practice of loving kindness, even toward the parts of yourself you resist, the mirrors of relationships, the karmic memories that can be rewritten, the silence that heals beyond words, the daily surrender of ego, the breath of Tonglen that carries ancestral pain, the recognition of emotional samsara, compassion with boundaries, tracing wounds back through dependent origination, the grounding of walking meditation, the lotus rising from trauma, the bodhisattva's tears that birth love, vows as anchors, the discipline of equanimity, seeing yourself through time, mantra as medicine, the emptiness of identity and trauma, the middle way in expression, and finally, compassion for the critic within. Each step has shown that pain is not the end, but the beginning, that wounds are not prisons, but teachers, that clarity does not come from escaping life, but from walking through it with awareness, compassion, and balance. You are not your past, not your fears, not your scars. You are the space that holds them, the awareness that transforms them, the heart that can open even in the darkest night. Before you drift into sleep, let this truth stay with you. Healing is not distant, it is happening, breath by breath, as you open to the path. Now I'd love to hear from you. What teaching tonight spoke to your heart the most? Was it the lotus rising from the mud, the power of vows, or the practice of silence? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your reflection may inspire someone else's healing. And if these teachings have touched you, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss another journey into wisdom and clarity. This path is one we walk together,